Welcome to Spirit Gym. Have you ever asked yourself why, even with all the books, apps, and breathwork techniques, meditation still feels impossible? Or why, despite knowing what's good for you, you keep doing the opposite? In today's episode, Paul is joined by Michael Holt, founder of the internationally renowned Savage and Saint Collective and a true warrior of consciousness. Together, they explore the neurological cost of repressed emotion, the energy drain of unresolved trauma, and the measurable benefits of consistent meditative practice. Paul and Michael discuss the invisible architecture of the self, the parts of the mind you didn't even realize were inherited, infected, or unconsciously running the show, and why most of what you believe isn't even yours. From spiritual bypassing and fake teachers to the real cost of ignoring your inner world, this episode will make you question who's really doing the thinking in your head and offers both insight and strategy into how to actually rewire your inner dialogue. If you enjoy this conversation, we invite you to explore the deeper levels of connection and conversation available in the Spirit Gym membership community. Go to myspiritgym.com for details. Before we dive in, we'd like to say thank you for listening, as this podcast would not be possible without you, our subscribers and followers. We'd also like to thank our premier sponsors, Organifi, Bioptimizers, Paleo Valley and Wild Pastures, and our new sponsors, Correct Life and Peak Tea. You'll hear their special offers and discounts throughout this episode, or you can visit the show notes page at paulchek.com/podcast.
Well, I'm super excited to have my buddy Michael Holt here today. We're going to have a deep dive on meditation, and I invited Michael to come back because I recently listened to his awesome podcast with Kyle Kingsbury on the Kyle Kingsbury Show, and Kyle is a soul brother to both of us. Kyle was recently here to do some podcasts with me and a beautiful ceremony and celebrate me getting bit by a rattlesnake. But we got through that. And so, Michael, it's just lovely to see you again. It's been a while. And how are you? And what have you been up to since the last time I hung out with you?
It has been a while, Paul, but I'm happy to be here. And
thank you.
Even though it's probably been 2 years since I saw you last, I always keep you close to my heart. So I feel like not too much time has passed since our...
It's hard to believe it's been 2 years. That's crazy.
Time flies. And I'm really happy to hear that you listened to my podcast with Kyle. It was such a honor to sit down with him and just rap, and he's definitely a kindred spirit. What I've been up to, the last time I saw you was here at Rainbow House, probably 2023 Mandala workshop.
Oh, great, yeah.
And it was a profound experience. And I remember the feedback that you gave me on my mandala was, you're solid, you're ready to rock. Your work now is to synthesize all this stuff that you've learned.
Right, I remember that now.
Your thing.
Right.
And I took that to heart. And that's where I've been spending my time and energy these past few years, is really building a system, a framework for the work of self-development as I understand it.
Yeah. Mandala workshops are both mine and Angie's favorites, just because they're so transformational and so much comes out of people, and they all love the readings that Angie and I give.
I'll say it was really profound to watch the readings that you and Angie were given, and just getting so needled into people's mind, heart, body, and the feedback you were giving them was like so accurate, and it was based on nothing other than a picture that they painted.
Well, Angie and I have spent a lot of our life studying symbology and dream analysis and, everything to do it. And, I studied art therapy for years and developed my own system of art therapy by taking the best components of several different systems and merging them together into my own system. But, Jung was the real founder and pioneer of art therapy as we know it today. And I studied his writings on mandala work and mandala symbolism. So it's a real blessing because, symbols are the language of dreams, and they're really the language of the soul. And so this is why I love tarot, because tarot is just loaded with symbolism. And, I teach a workshop called Tarot for Soul Guidance, which is not standard tarot, like divination, like going to see a fortune teller kind of stuff. But I teach people how to understand the symbols so they can understand through the tarot archetypes what their soul is trying to convey to them. So all of that merges together, the Mandala workshops. But really what I do is I just connect each person's soul and ask, okay, I see a dragon. What does that symbolize as it's relevant to you in your life right now? And so then the soul tells me. So I'm really actually just channeling people's souls. It looks like I'm doing some kind of a miraculous reading to a lot of people.
No, I understand. And it is amazing. I mean, I can kind of taste it a bit in my own life. The deeper you go into yourself and kind of connect to the ground of your being, the more accurately you can see someone's totality in a pretty short span of time and feed to them information about themselves that they're shocked that, how could you know that?
Well, the deeper truth, as you know, is that every living being is another aspect of ourself.
Mm-hmm.
So we're really just reading ourself. It just takes, time and honest commitment to legitimate spiritual development to break through the confines of our own ego and our personal shadow. That's the real barrier, is all the unconscious stuff, which I'm sure we'll get into as we go here. But, the Sufis call their practice polishing the mirror of the heart. And I think that's ultimately what it is. I'm sure you've been into bathrooms and parks and stuff where all sorts of shit scratched into the mirrors or, various places, and people write stuff with lipstick. So when you look at yourself in the mirror, you can only see your reflection crowded by or clouded by what everyone wrote on the mirror. The practice that I teach in Spirit Gym and all the practices and that I practice myself is that honest work of identifying, what's clouding your ability to see through the divine mirror of unconditional love. In other words, accept what's rising without having to buffer it because you're afraid of what you're seeing or don't like it or have a tendency to judge it. It takes a lot of spiritual courage to do that work. And I'm forever working with patients and students and Spirit Gym practitioners to, have a healthy confrontation with the parts of themselves that are generating illusions that don't really connect us.
Absolutely.
Internally and externally. So
I think for people
process.
who get into the work of self-development and self-growth, myself included probably at one point, you place conditions. Once I tidy this part of myself up, then I'll be able to accept myself unconditionally as soon as I get this out of the way.
Yeah.
But really the work begins in the work that I share with the guys I work with. It has to begin with an unconditional, radical, loving self-acceptance of yourself with no conditions placed on that. Then from there, begin the work of self-improvement, but already give yourself the sweet nectar of self-acceptance along the way, because that's all any of us are really after.
It's super important. One of the most common challenges I face as a therapist and have forever is for a variety of reasons, just don't love themselves and feel guilty and shameful about things that have happened or hold on to a lot of victim mentality because, mom did this to me, dad this, someone else did this. And, they can't reach a place of forgiveness. And that's the writing on the mirror, that's the stuff that clouds our perception. We cannot see more in any other than we can see in ourselves.
Absolutely.
So it's a real process, but it's the most important process, I think, going on in life itself, because it doesn't matter how much money you have or how good your sex is or how fancy your car is or any of that stuff. All you can take with you when you die is what you've become. If you can't be comfortable with yourself in life, you're going to have a real struggle with yourself without your body. Your body does a beautiful job of slowing consciousness down, and the brain is a very powerful filtration system, and it has, as you know, a capacity for repression. So we can stuff down the aspects of ourself that we don't want to deal with, or on the other side of it, people get so much stuff in their unconscious that it gets so pressurized that it pops up, and that leads to a lot of anxiety in people, but they don't know where it's coming from. So they end up, going to doctors and getting drugged. But, when you lose your body, you really die into your mind and into your astral body. And the challenge is that you create at the speed of thought. So if you're feeling really sad or lonely or depressed, if you have a body, you can take some Organifi happy drops and pick things up a little bit, or you can use a chemical or whatever. But when you don't have a body, there's no way to put those inputs in there. So you experience what you're creating at the speed of now, really. And that's why deep shamanic journeys are hard for people, because as you know, the plant medicines disable the default mode network. So the unconscious just comes roaring up into your consciousness, and you got to deal with it. So a properly run plant medicine ceremony is an awesome way to prepare for death.
Yeah, I would say meditation is similar.
Yeah, it
not
is.
the same, especially an extended meditation retreat, because there's no more buffers. There's no distraction from what's really going on. I would also say that, to your point, that a lot of the stuff in our unconscious is just stuffed down and repressed. Speaking from my own experience and seeing individuals like you, elder teachers that I look toward, as you allow and as you cultivate a lifestyle that allows for the liberation of all of that unexamined emotional residue and starts to self-liberate, it costs an enormous amount of energy to hold all that in and down.
Oh my God, it's
an
exhausting.
Enormous amount of energy.
It's what leads people to constantly grazing on sugar and caffeine.
It's probably the biggest energetic expense.
Yeah.
And once you allow for those knots to come undone, the energy that was formerly, tied up in holding everything in and down is now available for you to use on your path of meaning. That's why when I look to an individual like you, who's an older man, but your level of productivity is, stupefying. And that's
even to me.
it's typical actually for, the teachers who I've chosen on my path. And I can see it in myself now. I have more energy pumping through my body. I got good work coming through me, and I'm working effortlessly and tirelessly, really.
Yeah.
And I'm like, as a 40-year-old man now, I'm running circles around myself when I was 22, for example.
Well, a man reaches his peak capacity for productivity at age 42. And the reason is because at 42, that's the point in the average man's life where he still has enough strength and vitality as a male to get things done, but he's got enough maturation that their mind reaches a level of synthesis that they're capable of thinking effectively and planning. And, of course, that's an average, but you see that as the body ages and doesn't have enough chi in it, the mind just sucks the body dry. And if the body's not healthy, it can't feed the mind. You see a lot of people after 42, they grow more and more comprehensive, complex mental structure, but they don't have the vitality to put it into action. And then if you stay young in body, but don't grow in wisdom, then you're just like a young man in an older body, and you still haven't reached a level of, where you can access the deeper truths of things, because you have to have a pretty well-developed mind and enough diversity of life experience in order to filter out fantasy from reality, so to speak, or ideas, practical reality, practical application. So you're at a great time in your life for that reason.
I feel it. I feel like I'm in a great time in my life, and I feel like the future is very, very bright.
Yeah, well, there's certainly a lot of work for you to do out there for both of us and all of us that, offer real teachings. The thought that came to my mind when you were talking a second ago about how much energy it takes to hold all that stuff back, that the vision I had is that consciousness flows like a stream or a river. And the unconscious and the soul process information in parallel, so they can process almost infinite inputs simultaneously, but the conscious mind can only process information in series, which is one thought at a time.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're all living in the river of consciousness, anything that's in that river that you don't want is like someone standing there trying to push the river back.
Right.
I don't want to see that about myself, or I don't want to forgive that person. So, you can see someone standing in a river trying to push it back,
It's a great frame. Yeah. How much energy does it take to push the river back?
That's it.
Yeah.
It's like swimming upstream. It's hard work.
Sure.
If people realized how freeing it is and how liberating it is. And I think one of the most important aspects of this work that emerges from the work, but also has to come with the work is, radical self-honesty. In my video series on YouTube, which is a 6-part series, you might have seen it, called The Fastest Way to Health. The first thing I say is the fastest way to health is stop bullshitting yourself. Quit telling yourself that the coffee's good or that the sugar's good, and pay attention to what's happening to you. And, it's amazing to me. I've had so many patients, for example, come to me that are drinking huge amounts of coffee. And I'll say, well, what do you feel when you drink the coffee? And they say, to be honest with you, I get a headache. How long's that been going on? Oh, for years. Well, why do you keep doing it then? And then I hear the story, right?
That's a really good point. So I talk about this too. I teach a lot of very practical lifestyle interventions to up-level vitality, just like you. A lot of it I learned from you. But this is the information age.
Yeah.
The information is available, and people know what they could be doing or should be doing to feel better. The real work is pulling on the thread of, if I know what I should be doing, why am I not doing it?
Yeah.
Because now you have to ask the question, well, how do I conceptualize myself to myself? How do I treat myself? How do I look after myself? And all the work, I think, of self-development is learning how to treat yourself like somebody who you love, care for, and responsible for growing and developing. It's not a lack of information why people don't take good care of themselves. It's a lack of self-reverence.
And the problem is that if you don't have somebody to guide you, you can believe any number of so-called experts. The fact that there's so much information leads literally to what we call in the Army snafu, that term, situation normal, all fucked up. You're just, one of the most common things my students say to me is, Paul, you say this, but this guy who's got 3 PhDs says the opposite. Every time I research such and such, I find that experts of equal caliber disagree with each other. So, what do I do? I say, well, the simple solution is investigate it for yourself and quit listening to everybody else.
Totally.
Like I recently did a Paul Reacts post on cold plunging and
I saw it. Brilliant. Right. With the adrenal fatigue, the lady with the bags on her eyes. Yeah, it was great.
Right. So here's a lady saying the research says. I'm like, yeah, well, you saw it, but I'm making a point that you got to be very careful about research, because if you don't know enough about study design and all the things I mentioned, you can do all sorts of things based on research. And I remind my students all the time, you realize every single drug that killed thousands of people and had to be taken off the market was scientifically approved before it was put on the market.
Yeah.
So much for so-called science, and that's a long story in itself.
You have to test what works in the laboratory of your own personal experience
and with
rigor.
And what works for you may not work for somebody else.
Totally.
Right? We're as different on the inside as we are on the outside. And people forget that. And that's part of the illness of today's World Economic Forum, World Health Organization. All these guys are trying to create uniformity. That's what the whole transgender movement is a uniformity of sexlessness, which means you become a robot. And you're controllable, which is Steiner's aramonic. But what, you mentioned something a second ago that's really important, and that's people aren't paying attention to what their needs are. And what I've seen as a therapist my entire career, and even amongst my students and patients, which is my work as a therapist, but is that people have a very hard time distinguishing a need from a want. I want more coffee. I need more water or more rest. I want better skin, so I take a pill. But
or cream.
What I need is to detoxify my body.
Yeah.
And so that's why a long time ago I developed the 4-doctor model, because it tells you the difference between a want and a need. If you don't know what you need to create happiness for yourself, you'll always be looking for something that makes you happy, or someone, which is even more dangerous. If you don't know what your body needs for exercise, then you're susceptible to doing anything or nothing. If you don't know what your body's unique individual needs are for diet, then you're susceptible to diet books, and that's a disaster. And if you don't know what you need as far as rest and your own time for self-reflection and introspection, then you'll just be burned out all the time. So, those are critical distinctions, wants and needs. And if a person's cloudy on that, then their life will mirror that right back to them.
And the clarity that you get, I think, in being able to discern wants from needs comes from regularly coming, sitting still with yourself and allowing all the clouds to kind of dissipate and clarity to emerge.
Yeah, I think that's true, but I think also being with yourself. Like, I love to be in here alone painting.
Sure.
And alone stacking rocks. I love working out alone in the gym. It's amazing how many people cannot be alone with themselves. And so, this is sort of part of our topic, but it's so appropriate right now. A lot of people have a very hard time being alone with themselves in, say, a seated meditation, because maybe their body is kinesthetically driven. They're more movement oriented, or maybe they need something like music to harmonize them, good music to facilitate meditation. The first step towards a meditative practice, choosing activities that you can do with yourself and for yourself and by yourself to develop the relationship with yourself. And that can be a lot of things, right?
Absolutely.
Sitting and reading, some good spiritual literature.
Mm-hmm.
Or,
writing in a journal, taking a walk,
gardening,
preparing your meal, taking a shower. I think meditation is being intentional with your attention.
Yes.
And you can do that. You don't need to be in full lotus with your eyes closed, sitting still in the dark to do that. You can take whatever you're doing, in your daily life and just infuse it with an intention to be meditative while you do it. It's like single tasking. There's a Zen master once asked, "What is Zen?" And he answered, "Doing one thing and then doing the next thing."
Yeah.
So if you, in some traditions, they call it mixing practices. You have your formal seated meditation practice, but then you have mixing practices, things that you can do that you're able to kind of maintain some kind of stewardship over your mind while you're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Because the utility of meditation practice, as I understand it, isn't not to become a great meditator. It's to become a skillful, fully feeling, fully free human being.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to bring the skills that you're cultivating in the formal practice into your life, and you can find specific activities that are easy for you to do that.
I was just watching an excellent interview. I forgot the guy's name. It was Jeffrey Mishlove interviewed him. And he was a Buddhist monk, I think, for 10 years. And I think he's got a degree in psychology as well. He has come up with a new, what could become a medical diagnosis, which kind of has a strange name, but he calls it inverse hallucination, or reverse hallucination, which I don't think is a good name. But what he's identified is that one of the biggest problems we have is that people are so derealized, so not in their bodies and not present that they are actually just kind of like robots walking around. And he was talking about like how many car accidents and industrial accidents and things are happening to people because they're doing things like running saws and driving cars and, stuff where you need to be present for your safety and that of others, but they're not.
Yeah.
And how social media is just sucking people right up out of their bodies into their heads. And he also made a good argument for the fact that one of the reasons we have so much obesity in the world right now is that people are so detached from their bodies. They're not only not paying attention to what they're eating or how much they're eating or when they're eating, but what it's doing to their bodies. I've been dealing with that as a therapist forever. And it's just like, wow. And we have this whole kind of embodiment movement. But I've found that some of the teachers that teach embodiment are very disembodied. Just like we were just talking earlier, and you were talking about how many meditation teachers really shouldn't be teaching meditation yet. And so it's a really one of the dangers of the information age and the digital age is that it's taking us up into the realm of information and archetypes. Information can be so diverse and so antagonistic to the reality of being a living, like a lot of information that people ingest is destructive.
And distracting.
And very distracting.
Yeah, it's like, I think if you look back on human history 100, 200 years ago, it was a much slower pace of life. There was a lot of boredom, not a lot to do, but there's not really a lot of boredom for people anymore. There's always something glomming for your attention, some shiny notification on your phone or some podcast that you could be listening to. Everything is stacked. You could take a walk, but you could take a walk while you listen to a podcast. But all of that it's almost like another layer of fog that needs to be cut through. The initial layer is just your own wandering, distracted mind. But now you have to cut through a whole bunch of fog just to get to that.
I remember reading in one of Robert O. Becker's book, the most common one people would recognize as The Body Electric. But I think this book was written around 99 or somewhere in the early 2000s, maybe 2005, 6. But he said something pretty remarkable in there. They analyzed how much information at the time that the book was published the average person was exposed to on a 24-hour basis, a daily basis. And they correlated that with how much information the average person was exposed to in the year 1900. And the conclusion was, at the time of the publishing of the book, that the average human being is exposed to more information in 24 hours than the entire life of someone born in 1900.
Totally makes sense. It's enough to drive you crazy.
It's like, that's to give an analogy, if you have a garden hose and we say water represents information, if the hose was flowing naturally with enough pressure that you could manage it and water your garden and not destroy things in 1900, we now have probably 1 million times the water flowing through that hose. And, any fireman will tell you when you charge a big hose up, you got to hang on tight.
Totally.
And so we've now got a metaphorical garden hose that's under so much pressure, it'll literally take the paint off your car. Like a sandblaster.
So like we said earlier, it's not, lack of information is not an obstacle nowadays. It's an overabundance of information.
Yeah.
And how do you unplug from the constant stream of information and entertainment that is always available right at the tip of your finger? You don't have to sit still. You don't have to even be uncomfortable for a moment.
Yeah.
You can numb out and put the pacifier in with something that will take your mind away from your body and away from your breath. But it's like the breath and the body are the Sherpas that will guide you to the depth of yourself.
Yeah, you might want to explain what Sherpa is for people.
Well, it's like a mountain guide. If you want to climb a good mountain, you need a good guide. And, and the breath and the body are the guides that will take you to a more grounded, coherent vantage point from which to view yourself and the world.
Yes. Hi, everybody. My family and I love Organifi's green juices. You can get your green juice in 2 excellent flavors, crisp apple and original mint. Not only are these products made with certified organic ingredients to support your family's nutritional needs, they each have some unique benefits. Your green juice crisp apple eases stress with an effective dose of 600 milligrams of ashwagandha per serving. Helps reduce cortisol spikes that increase snacking urges and aids keeping your blood sugar balanced. Why snack on inferior foods that lack nutrition and often lead to blood sugar spikes followed by blood sugar crashes when Organifi's green juices are super healthy, taste great, and are as quick to make as opening the package and adding water. Your green juice crisp apple is made from fresh apples picked right off the branch and are packed with micronutrients to support your body's needs. Green Juice Original Mint contains ashwagandha, chlorella, and spirulina. Reset your body every morning with 11 detoxifying superfoods. You'll love the delicious taste, and your body will feel strong and stable with all the micronutrients in each serving. Green Juice Original Mint promotes balanced cortisol and stress levels, perfect for weight management, and helps rid the body of harmful toxins. Personally, I'm super grateful that Organifi makes such excellent, easy-to-use drinks and foods that keep us energized, healthy, and clean inside while decreasing the urge to crave on inferior snack foods. My kids love both flavors, and I love knowing that we can all be healthy together with Organifi's excellent crisp apple and original mint green juices. These products are excellent for work, on the road, sharing with friends, and anytime you need a nutritious boost that tastes good. To get your crisp apple and original mint green juices, go to organifi.com/CHEK20. That's Organifi.com/CHEK20. Save 20% on your purchase using the code CHEK20, all caps, on checkout. Don't worry if you forget your Living 4D discount code, because you'll see it right there on the landing page. Enjoy Organifi's excellent green juices. What we're talking about is one of the reasons I went into meditation. I've got probably a dozen books debating what reality is, and written by very elite scientists and philosophers and psychologists, and they just can't agree on what reality is, which to me is interesting. And so whenever I see this kind of conflict, even amongst highly intelligent people, I make it my task to go talk to the part of me that has answers for these questions. And so I ask my soul, which is also my spirit, myself, define for me what reality is. I mean, I have my own ideas, but I want to know, what the God self in me has to say. And my soul gave me two beautiful definitions, which I think are totally important today with everything we've said in context. Reality is two things. It's what's happening right now, and it's everything that your life depends upon. So if you're spending time on social media, but you forget to water the garden or feed your children or care for your pets, or you're not paying attention to the fact that they're poisoning the entire planet with herbicides, pesticides, fungicides, rodenticides, glyphosate, chemtrails, then you're out of touch with reality. And because it's what our life depends upon, the more out of touch we become with that, the more our life is threatened. And the more anxiety that is produced in the unconscious, because the unconscious is not bound by time and space. So it's processing everything in parallel, and it knows that without a body, you're dead. Without nature, you're dead. So we can actually find ourselves falling into a stream of nervousness and anxiety because the part of us that's in touch with reality is constantly trying to communicate conscious ego. Don't eat that. Don't buy that.
This doesn't matter.
Don't support that.
Right, yeah.
Because people are in this trance state.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not the kind of trance where you're in communication with your highest self or your soul. It's the kind of trance where you're entranced. And, I often say to people, don't forget the word television means tell a vision, but it's not your vision. It's the one they want to plant in you.
Sure.
So if you aren't in touch with reality, you can't distinguish make believe from what you believe. And the word believe in my language means be live. So whatever you believe, you make live. You embody it. And so when you start believing stuff that counteracts and is antagonistic to reality, what's happening right now, I'm walking across the street, I need to pay attention. And what it is that keeps us all alive, we're in deep shit. And right now we're swimming in probably the most dangerous, distracted populace in the world that we've ever had.
The more disconnected you are from reality, the more easy you are to manipulate, coerce, and control. And the more, unbeknownst to you, you're giving away your power as a creator of your own reality. And you're being led to believe a reality that is not in your best interest.
Yes. And as a side note, that's one of the primary problems that I've had with religion my entire career as a therapist, because people simply believe. Ask, is this really true? Don't understand what a myth is. They don't understand allegorical teachings. They don't understand everything is taken as literal. The problem is if you look at the fact that most of this religious programming comes from the first time you set foot in church, if not in the womb, then it's sitting in your unconscious. And I've had many people come to me for healing work and plant medicine ceremonies. And through my analysis to get them ready for a ceremony, I say, you're going to need to be really careful about your, religious beliefs about such and such. And they'll say, oh, I don't believe in any of that shit. I'm an atheist, or I'm they'll say something that tries to convince me that they're beyond that. I say, no, that's the part of you that you think is
you're
beyond.
aware of, yeah.
That's the part of you that you have contact with. That's an idea that you're imposing, which is kind of like, it's kind of like putting a handkerchief over a hand grenade and pretending that thing isn't there.
Yeah.
And then the medicine pulls the pin and off we go. But the point is that I have nothing against religion. I just have a lot against the abuse of religion and the dissemination of these ideas by, unfortunately, very unenlightened people.
Whose main objective maybe is less around facilitating your direct experience of God and more around making you an obedient citizen who's not going to ruffle any feathers and go with the program.
Well, it's really about making you subservient to an imaginary God.
Sure. I think it's a quote you shared with me a while back. I think it's Carl Jung. Religion, I'm paraphrasing, but religion exists to spare man from a direct experience of God.
Yes. Yeah. The function of religion is to protect man from the direct experience of God. And very few people really understand that unless you've had a direct experience of God. But a direct experience of God is like 1,000 pounds of TNT to the ego.
Mm-hmm.
And to the self. It is complete annihilation of the self. And having had many of them, I can tell you, if you're not ready to let go to God and trust that whether you die or not, you're going to be okay, experience of God is by far the most intense experience you can have. But the function of religion was two things: organize a culture so they don't kill each other with morals, values, and ethics. A society can evolve, give you practices, sometimes with and sometimes without drugs, depending on how far back you go in the religion, but give you practices that open you to the numinous, which is something so powerful and magical that your conscious mind can't wrap its head around it, which is a religious experience.
Mm-hmm.
Once the religions became corporatized as control systems, carefully weeded out all the aspects of the religion that opened you to the experience of God, because once you're no longer afraid to die, they can't control you.
Right. Once you get across the river, you don't need the boat.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
as soon as you realize the truth of God, you know that there is no burning you in hell and all that
Right.
other stuff. So, you know, all their control tools have been gone. You know, it's kind of like during COVID, those that thought they couldn't survive without a vaccine and believed that the best thing to do was to stay out of the sunlight and avoid all the natural stuff.
Fucking nutty time that was.
You know, most of those people are dead or severely injured.
Yeah.
And so, you know, there's a great example of how an idea goes against reality.
It's a good example.
And how quickly it can be spread and how quickly it can infect a person's mind.
And a culture's mind.
The world culture's mind, not just a culture, but the world culture. You know, speaking of culture, Arnold Mandela says a culture is a bunch of people doing the same things. And today it's not a healthy thing to be enculturated, because if you're in the consensus, you're already in deep shit. And, you know, the challenge is if you haven't reached the level of an adult that can stand on your own 2 feet and take responsibility for self-approval, self-validation, then you will follow the herd because your sense of identity is attached to the herd, which means you're in the child archetype. And so when something like COVID happened, it was just a glaring example of what Ken Wilber has warned that the problems would be when 70% of the world population is still in the child archetype. And that means subservience to some father figure, unfortunately, or mommy or daddy figure, whether it be in the sky or on the television or on your phone. And, you know, that's the most profitable trick there is.
Yeah, and a severe contempt for anyone who's becoming their own adult.
Yeah, and that's ethnocentric religion.
Yeah.
My group against your group, right? My Jesus against your whoever, Muhammad, Buddha, whatever. And so, you know, that's highly polarizing. And the more you polarize consciousness, the further you get from the center of yourself. And the more it's you against the other guys. And that's just such a very effective formula for brainwashing and controlling people. But here we are in 2025. People are adept at using AI. They can do magic on Photoshop. They can do all sorts of wild and crazy shit, but they still can't discern the difference between myth and reality. And they don't even understand what a myth is. Because we're talking about it, I'll bring something up that's extremely important, and Ken Wilber says in his teachings, and I think it's absolutely powerful, as typical of Ken Wilber. He says, whenever you're reading a myth, for example, pretty much all scripture, always use the words as if. It's as if Jesus walked on water. It's as if Jesus fed 6,000 people by waving his hands. It's as if Jesus turned water into wine. It's as if Zeus was the god of lightning. What that tells you is to use it symbolically, to look what it's pointing to. Jesus did not walk on water, not Jesus of Nazareth, not a human being. Nobody's done that yet. Not that I've ever heard of. Maybe some Buddhists that's achieved rainbow body, but then you'd have to say which body is walking on the water, the astral body or the physical
body.
And if there is people that walk on water, they're so few and far between, it would be a chimera that hardly anyone would believe in. If you understand, it's as if God would burn you in hell. Well, let's just start right there. If it's as if God would burn you in hell, ultimately, what is God? Consciousness. Without consciousness, there's no point in any of it.
Right.
If it's as if consciousness would burn you in hell, is simply saying it's as if you're going to have to suffer the consequences of what you believe.
Which is real.
Which is real.
Yeah, hell is real.
And one of my favorite books is The Bible as a Dream by Professor of Jungian Psychology Murray Stein. He goes through the key passages and aspects of the Bible and interprets them through Jungian dream analysis.
Interesting.
And it reveals a completely different understanding of the Bible than most people could even, come to on their own without a lot of, deep training in dream analysis and things like that. But, really, what is a dream analysis? It's a symbolic interpretation of something. And I tell people in my myth training and Spirit Gym, I say, look, if you want to really have a fascinating experience, realize that most people are sleepwalking in life. Wouldn't you agree?
Mind wandering mode is the phrase that one of my teachers would use.
Yes.
An unfortunate state of consciousness that passes for normal in the modern era.
Yes. So let's just say most people are unconscious, which we'd call sleepy-like, okay? Well, then if you take any day in your life, let's say yesterday a dog ran in front of you and you hit it and it damaged your car and you killed the dog and the owners of the dog got really upset and, all the drama, any number of days we could have to say, oh my God, that was a rough day to get through. And then you analyze that as a dream. It's shocking how deep the realization of how what seems like an accidental event or an unfortunate event turns out to carry a lot of deep meaning and instruction for how things shape that way and how with that level of consciousness you can reframe the experience and say, okay, I can look at the analysis of the dream and what it's telling me is stop texting while you're driving. Be present, be here now.
Be where you are.
Be where you are and be with what's happening. A dog, symbol of man's best friend. Because I was texting, I killed man's best friend.
No, it's a really fascinating way to look at your waking life, as if every encounter is packed with meaning, or there's some intelligence that's wanting to school you in every situation that you're in.
Yeah, well, God's ubiquitous, right? So ultimately, all of this is God becoming aware of itself. And when you invest light, we'll call light as a symbol of consciousness, into matter, light becomes very entangled and subdued. There's only so much consciousness you can get out of a rock because it's highly entangled. A sweet potato is a lot less entangled. A mountain lion is less entangled. But when you look at the fact that most people are still very trapped in their bodies, which is, flesh and bone and water, their ability to access the light of consciousness limited to the degree that their sense of awakening is only at the material level because their things are very entangled. But for example, when you're analyzing or when you're dreaming, you're not in your body. You're in the astral dimension, and the body that you're seeing, all the bodies you're seeing, whether it's houses, cars, alligators, dragons, or lovers, those are bodies of astral light. So the level of entanglement there is very, very little. It's just enough light to create an illusion, which is the expression of your conscious upwellings. Most people have had experiences where their dreams were so friggin' intense that when they woke up, they realized that they are a lot less conscious in what they called their waking state than they were in the state of being lucid in a dream for a few minutes, which is what a good plant medicine ceremony does for you. Like a lot of people that don't know any better think, oh, you're gonna be unconscious while you're doing that. I'm like, I got news for you. You'll be more conscious than you've probably ever been in your life.
You'll be there for everything. It's interesting to take that orientation to a dream when you retrospectively look back and recognize that there was no one else in the dream. It was all you.
Yes.
It's all you in your own mind. And then to bring that orientation into your waking life and just for a moment pretend that you're not inside looking out at something else that's separate from you, but everything that you see is actually you.
Absolutely. The only exception to that are what are called prophetic dreams. For example, the night before the Twin Towers went down, the 9/11 event, hundreds of people had very intense dreams telling them in one way, shape, or form or another not to go to work that day. And I've actually seen a documentary interviewing like 30 of these people. And some of them actually saw airplanes flying into the Twin Towers and they worked there. Wow. They were accountants or lawyers or whatever. And it shocked them so deeply they decided to take the day off. and every one of them lived because they listened to that dream. So the point I'm making is, in a prophetic dream, you can actually dream about events that are coming, or you might dream that your mother's going to get cancer if she doesn't stop smoking or drinking. So part of when I'm doing dream analysis, I always have to look carefully, or is there qualities of a prophetic dream versus a typical dream? But in Jungian dream analysis and many other systems of dream analysis, everything in the dream represents an aspect of yourself. Even if you're dreaming of your lover or your aunt, your uncle, your cousin.
It's all you.
It's all you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I have many ways of showing people how to identify, how to find what the parts of them in the dream. For example, people often dream of problems with hot water heaters exploding. And so I say, okay, you're mostly water. You're talking about a problem with your plumbing and that which heats your water. So if we just look at that real practically, what heats your water is your metabolism. So if you're drinking too much coffee or doing drugs that overstimulate the system, that could overheat the water and lead to an explosion. And your circulatory system, including your heart, is your plumbing system. Right away, when I look at a dream like that, I'm asking, what's the as if? It's as if your metabolism was overheating or your life is running at such a speed that the pressure that your heart has to generate to meet the demand for the stress you're under can blow a water pipe, which could be an aneurysm, a blood vessel, any number of things.
Sure.
And it's usually not hard at all to find the physical evidence that the dream's pointing to in the person's actual living experience at the time.
What do you reach for when you need a snack to keep you going between meals? Here at the CHEK household, we always have a selection of Paleo Valley's meat sticks close at hand. They are made from 100% grass-fed beef and venison or pasture-raised pork and chicken, and they contain organic spices to create flavors like buffalo-style chicken, jalapeno beef, and maple bacon pork. Paleo Valley's meat sticks are naturally fermented, so they are shelf-stable without the use of icky chemicals or questionable ingredients. Did you know that virtually all other similar snack stick products use GMO corn-based citric acid encapsulated in hydrogenated oils to process their products? Who wants to be eating that? Paleo Valley's meat sticks taste amazing and are good for you too, packed with protein and also gut-friendly probiotics created by the fermentation process. Paleo Valley sources from USA family farmers focused on using regenerative farming practices. This type of farming helps produce more nutrient-dense, nourishing meat while supporting the local ecosystem by helping rebuild topsoil, improve biodiversity, and sequester carbon while avoiding the use of chemicals and pesticides. So if you're looking for a snack that is good for you, good for the environment, and good for your budget, go to paleovalley.com/CHEK15 and get 15% off your order of Paleo Valley meat sticks. That's paleovalley.com/CHEK15 for a 15% savings. Snack and be happy.
Well, Michael, our dialogue so far has set us up beautiful now for the thing I wanted to approach with you next. I know you've studied with many of the best meditation teachers of our day. I'm confident that, like myself, you've also studied much of the available literature on the benefits of meditation. So before we get into the various challenges of and approaches to meditation, can you share an overview of what benefits most anyone can expect from meditation and about how much time commitment it takes to gain each of the benefits you describe?
So the benefits are long. Enhanced cognition, performance excellence across the board, whatever. If you look at all the things an individual has to do in the modern era, you might be a wife, a mother, entrepreneur, athlete, if you, the lowest common denominator in all of those pursuits is your own mind.
Yeah.
And so if you engage the practice of clarifying your mind, it's like sharpening the blade of your mind so that whatever you do, you'll do better. So performance excellence across the board is certainly a consequence of deep practice. Also, emotional regulation, the capacity to respond to life rather than react habitually. So often we'll have the experience where we say or do something and then look back and think, damn it, I wish I hadn't done that.
Yeah.
And so it takes effort, really.
That's how you know you have an unconscious mind.
Sure. So to act from intention rather than compulsion. One of my teachers, Shinzen, would always say, you have 0.3 of a second before the terrorists take the building, meaning something happens.
Yeah.
It triggers a cascade of chemicals in your body, and before you even know what you're doing, you've said something you regret saying. And so consistent practice gives you the ability to press the veto button on a compulsive reaction to a moment and to respond intentionally.
Yes.
And intentionally is the key word there. So you can start to govern yourself from the space of your intention. Who do you want to be and how do you want to be, rather than thought, because thought will always betray you. Establishing concentration is the prerequisite for performance excellence in all tasks. And to establish concentration takes effort. I think a pitfall that a lot of individuals encounter on the path of meditation is they don't try hard enough.
Yeah.
And effortful mindfulness is chapter 1. And that's not necessarily I think a major hindrance is people's expectation that meditation practice should be relaxing, be like very calming and almost therapeutic. But to get to a point where your practice can bear fruit, it's almost like you have to tame a wild animal of your own mind.
Yeah.
With a certain degree of consistency and intensity. Meditation is the cultivation of attentional skills. And attentional skills are no different than any other skill. To cultivate them, if you want to be a good guitar player, you have to show up to the guitar with consistent intensity.
Yes.
If you want to cultivate muscle, you got to show up to the gym with consistent intensity. If you want to develop yourself as a Muay Thai practitioner, you got to train with consistency and intensity.
Yeah.
So meditation is no different.
Yeah. I think one of the big problems is that most people don't have a conscious intention for almost anything they're doing. They're just kind of acting out their programming and kind of flowing with the social conundrum of the day. Again, COVID was a great example of a lack of intention. And, it's like, as you know, I teach rock stacking workshops, and the ones I got to watch the most are the ones that aren't clear on what their intention is. The problem with the stone Buddhas is that they're very harsh teachers.
Immediate consequences.
There's immediate consequences for not being clear on what your intentions are and making sure your intentions are realistic to the forces of nature, such as gravity.
Sure.
And so this, again, is why the 4-doctor model is so important, because, Dr. Happiness is the director of dream, goals, and objectives. Your dream, your goal, or your objective at any time should be a direct reflection of your intention. So if you are wandering kind of aimlessly through life and just hoping to make enough money to support your habits, that's not a lot of intention. And that makes you very easy to capture.
Yeah, even by your own mind.
Yes.
It's like
but sorry to interject, but most people don't even have their own mind.
Sure.
That's the capture that happens before they even realize they've lost their mind.
And so to live in a way where you're directed by your intention would require that you alter the vantage point from which you view your own thoughts.
Yes.
Because your thoughts will betray you. Your thoughts will always betray you.
Yeah.
And it takes some practice to be able to allow thoughts to arise and pass without allowing them to influence your course of action, to stay committed to your intention and to allow that to dictate how you behave and how you show up on a daily basis. That, capacity is born in the meditation practice just by allowing thoughts to arise and pass. It's almost like The untrained mind, there's no distinction between you and your thoughts.
Right.
It feels like it's very much that voice inside your head is what you are. But as you start to relax more deeply into deeper states of awareness, the voice behind your eyes arises and passes, and it becomes less personal.
Yeah.
And you don't necessarily allow thinking to alter your course of action. You live from intention. And so, like, it becomes effortless, actually. I think about it. I think I'm going to risk sounding arrogant here, but if an individual was to shadow me for a day, they might deduce that I'm a very disciplined individual.
Yes.
But I don't feel disciplined at all. I
Yeah.
feel there's an effortless in sticking to my routines and my regimens that's just very easy, because thought is no longer a obstruction.
Yeah, it brings two things up to put on the table. David Bohm says something very powerful. He said, and as he's very qualified to say this, no man can do deep thinking until he has healthy rituals.
Yeah,
And
I love that.
the point is that a ritual always engages some kind of sacrifice. Rituals were developed around sacrifice. So if we don't have healthy rituals, which I classify as 4 doctors, then we're always in a state of imbalance. We're not eating right. We're not drinking enough water. We're not moving our body. We're not breathing. We're not sleeping. We're constantly distracted. And because of what I'm sure you're aware of, the negative bias of the body, our nervous system is set up so that we have a greater chance of surviving in nature. So we're unconsciously aware of things like poisonous snakes and that bears can eat you. And there's a lot of things in nature that'll kill you, as I know too well. So it is inherent in the body to look for threats in the environment. The more unhealthy your body is, the more it's trying to tell you that there's a threat, there's a threat, there's a threat. But once you have a healthy ritual and your body's being fed, it's being watered, it's being moved, it's breathing, then you can rise above the body and get into what we would call some real deep thinking or contemplative meditation or contemplation of.
Sure.
You can really begin to use your mind as a tool that is not limited by the state of the body.
Exactly. And high concentration, continuous staying of mind, I think is to cultivate that is cognitively demanding. It takes work.
Mm-hmm.
And so you need energy. And so the healthier your body, the healthier your daily rituals, the deeper you can go into the contemplative path. Furthermore, I think that having those rituals in place as just constants in your daily flow eliminates the expense of decisions. You don't have to make decisions around what you're going to do every morning because you do the same thing every morning.
Right.
And that actually frees up a lot of space for contemplation.
Yes.
And you can have this experience where once your daily rituals are kind of baselined, it's almost like the body mind is on autopilot and you can just abide as an observer. And that's a very fruitful vantage point to view the unfolding world from.
Yes, that in the stages of learning, reaching the point where you don't have to think about healthy routines is called unconscious competency.
Exactly. Sure.
Your unconscious mind is programmed in ways by intention that are freeing to you.
Yes.
And the other thing that came up in me that I think is really important to put on the table is a lot of people are very unaware that a huge percentage of their thoughts are not actually their own. They're either coming through the family tree, through ancestral downflow, they're coming from the social milieu. If you look, for example, at the science of memetics, which is memes are very skillfully crafted to infect your mind. we all know of the power of a jingle. Like,
Sure.
think of some of our favorite songs that get
Doors unlimited, unlimited doors. That was like a commercial from when I was 7, and it's just
Right.
in me still.
I still you know, it's funny, as I was going to mention exactly that. I remember when I was a kid, Sears had an ad that ran on the radio all the time. We didn't have a television till just about the time I left home, but and this thing still comes into my mind, and it's like it pesters the shit out of me. I'll be out stacking rocks or
Sure.
writing an article, and all of a sudden, everything you wanted but didn't get for Christmas is on sale now at Sears. And I'm like, but you get out of here. And another one that infected me is the Olympia beer commercial that ran forever when I was younger. Don't you know it's the water that makes the Olympia beer? Like, you know, if you don't get vaccinated, you're going to die. There's a meme.
Sure.
Okay, so the point is, memes, as Richard Dawkins says in his book, The Selfish Gene, infect the mind. And they want a mind in order to proliferate themselves. The meme wants to reproduce itself, like, you know, a metaphorical viral infection. And so if we're not aware, then we're actually being memed all the time, but don't realize those are not our own thoughts. And if you also consider the fact that one layer below the personal unconscious is the collective unconscious, and we're all tapped into the collective unconscious 24/7. So whatever's going on in the world is resonating through us, which is
Totally
why we have to have an ego structure to repress that, or a schizophrenic is someone who cannot repress the collective unconscious or their personal unconscious. The other thing that people forget is that the ego is largely made of other people's ideas. Our ego developed through the influence of our parents, our family, our friends, our educational indoctrination, our religious indoctrination. I say to my students in my classes, if I could download your conscious mind or your ego into a quantum supercomputer and ask it to identify what percentage of the thoughts that go through your head on a daily basis were authentically of your own creation, what percentage of those thoughts would actually be your own novel creations? And my students, impressively, almost always get it right. The highest percent I've ever heard is 5%, but most people say somewhere between 1% and 2%.
I would have said less than 1%.
I would agree. It's a very, very small amount. Like,
well, the self-structure is the aggregate of your experience. There's actually nothing solid there.
Yeah.
It's like a rainbow. It's vividly occurring, though insubstantial.
Yes.
And so I would say that consistent meditation practice allows an individual more sovereignty with the ideas, perceptions, beliefs about themselves and the world that they allow to propagate, because you can maybe for the first time start to inquire, did I select this or idea about myself in the world? Or is this just something that I inherited? And most of them are just what you inherited. So you can start this process of pruning your garden and cutting at the root the memes that are not serving, and start to plant thoughts, ideas, beliefs, perceptions about self and world that are beneficial. You can make a beautiful garden of your own mind, but only if you tend to it regularly.
Yeah, in Spirit Gym, I teach several techniques for making that conversion, so you can take unconscious memes, thoughts, self-defeating negative thoughts, feelings, and emotions, and convert them into dream affirmative thoughts, feelings, and emotions in ways that are fairly effective. Because without some degree of technique, the unconscious is so powerful. It's you can't just say, I don't want to think that way, and expect it to go away.
Of course
you know,
not.
it's the longer something's been in your unconscious, it's like a deeper groove in a record. It's harder to get the needle to jump out of that groove.
Totally.
The analogy I give my students is to show them how hard it is to change the unconscious is, I say, imagine you're out in the forest and you see a waterfall at the top of a mountain, and you see the creek coming down the side of the mountain. And then there's places where there's that creek's cut itself 20 feet into the earth. How long would it take you with a shovel or even a bulldozer to move that stream? Well, that's the stream of facilitation. So every time you think a thought, we have to deal with the law of facilitation, which says when an impulse passes once through a given set of neurons to the exclusion of others, it tends to do so on a future occasion, and each time it traverses this path, the resistance will be smaller. So the more we think, I don't love myself, or I'm not smart enough, the more facilitated it gets. So it becomes almost like a self-perpetuating prophecy.
Sure.
And so if we think we can just use superficial New Age silliness to move that creek,
To get a quick fix.
then we're basically
Deluding yourself.
taking aspirin to get rid of a headache.
Sure. The upside is, though, if you think to yourself, well, how often have I practiced this thought or belief?
Yeah.
I've gotten so efficient at, let's say, self-doubt that I can do it very efficiently and very
Unconsciously.
frequently because I've practiced it.
Yeah.
The problem is we're largely unconscious about what we're practicing moment by moment.
Yeah.
And we allow the mind to just run itself on autopilot, and we're getting very efficient at training in the training of states that are not beneficial.
Yeah.
That's the bad news. The good news is that there's a flip side to that coin. And with proper amount of practice and training, you can train beneficial, positive states.
Yes.
Now, my beef with like New Age spirituality is that they kind of gloss over how difficult that is
Yes.
and how heroic you have to be in your discipline.
And the whole field of behavioral psychology glosses that over.
Sure, but it is possible.
Yes, it is.
It's definitely possible, and it's not easy, but it's nowhere near as hard as not doing it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. Sometimes doing turns out to be a lot less challenging, stressful, and time-consuming than not doing.
100%.
You
And
know,
this is definitely true in the case of meditation. It's not easy, but it's so much easier than not doing it.
it's like people that come to me as patients with illnesses and diseases, and I say, it's really, really important that you start cooking for yourself instead of going out and eating at restaurants and fast food joints. And they always say, I don't have time. And I say, how much time have you spent in doctor's office, drugstores, and lines waiting to get pills, and therapist's office? And here you are, not only spending time with me, but a lot of money with me. Now, if you would have just spent that cooking real food and putting your money in the hands of real farmers, you probably would not need my help, nor the doctors, nor the drugs. So,
Plus, you're going to get energy and time back.
Yes, you
from
are.
that investment.
Yeah. You know, when you invest in reality, you get a reality return and you stay in reality. The next thing I wanted to explore with you is meditation is often challenging for most people, as you know. Some have a hard time finding the time to meditate. Some don't believe it will help them. Some have such a severe case of monkey mind that they simply give up on meditation. Some like to meditate but don't have the discipline to progressively grow deeper into their meditation practice, or are too inconsistent to gain any meaningful growth. So, Michael, can you give an overview of the path of meditation and how we can grow through these common challenges?
I think, like I mentioned a moment ago, the path begins with effortful mindfulness or effortful concentration. And the key word there is effortful.
Yes.
I've had the good fortune of encountering real deal bona fide teachers who, based on the way they live and frame the practice, inspired in me effort. And I think a pitfall for a lot of individuals is they are unaware of how hard you have to try.
Mm-hmm.
You really have to make it a priority and bring strong determination and really vigilance and intensity to the practice for a period of time. And then effortful mindfulness becomes habituated, and it just becomes kind of the basis of operation from which you operate in your life. Effortful mindfulness, you can start to relax your vigilance, but what you find is the mind doesn't wander as much as it used to.
Mm-hmm.
It just stays, and effortful mindfulness kind of relaxes into watchfulness, and watchfulness relaxes into awareness, and awareness is quite effortless, and you can just abide in that, but really go for it at the outset. I have a teacher who used to use a phrase called something like the arrogance of humility. When people say, well, I tried meditation, but it just doesn't work for me. I'm the one person that this won't work for. This wisdom has been handed from heart to heart, mind to mind in an unbroken stream for thousands and thousands of years. But for me, it doesn't really work. I'm the one that doesn't work for me. Mm-hmm. And so there's an arrogance hidden in there. It's like,
that translates to I don't work for me.
Right. It does work. Mm-hmm. You just really have to show up. And I think it's imperative that you call forth some effort. And if you understand what is available to you on the other side of the effort, you'll deduce that the effort is totally worth bringing. I had students, on retreats that I've taught, they'll say to me, I never heard anybody say in a guided meditation, tell me to try harder. But now look, absolutely, effort becomes a hindrance at a certain part of the path. You have to just stop trying. It becomes agitating, and you have to even get over this conceptualization of yourself as a meditator in a technique where you're meditating. But an effort needs to be surrendered altogether. But that comes after you've really trained your mind to stay. And your mind is built to wander. Furthermore, we live in a culture that encourages distraction at every turn. Mm-hmm. So if you would pull your own mind from the cultural momentum of constant distraction, you really got to go for it. And a lot of these individuals, I'm sure, have achieved something in life that they're proud of. How hard did you try? How hard did you try to get yourself fit or become a good painter or etc.? So anything in life worth having, any skill worth developing requires effort to develop.
And research shows that it takes, on average, 10,000 hours of committed practice to achieve mastery at anything. To be a master carpenter or a master chef or a master motocross racer, no matter what it is, on average, just 10,000 hours of commitment. And, I've had my buddy Jonathan Bluestein on my podcast, I think 3 times now, and he brought up a point which I totally agreed with. He said, the most important thing we can do is find one thing in our life that we're willing to apply the discipline to achieve mastery. Because once we achieve mastery at any one thing, we know how to do it. We have the pathways in place, and it becomes easier to master the next thing and successively the next thing. And I think that's really important. And it brings up a quote that I heard one time, a long time ago. I don't know who said it, but it's quite simple. 80% of life is just being there, which means, you got to be there when you're kicking the soccer ball or stacking the rocks or painting the painting or loving your lover. I mean, the number of stories I've heard from patients and students about challenges of sex where they can tell that their partner's not even there.
Right.
Or wives complaining because their sex is lousy because their husband's thinking about work instead of, having sex with them. So that leads to another thing that I think is very important, and I'm sure you would agree with, that I teach my students all the time. Because as you know, I offer people an HLC2 to commit to a gong, 100-day committed practice. And if you miss a day, you have to start over. Mm-hmm. And many of them will say things like, well, especially with meditation, well, I just fall asleep all the time, so I gave up on it, or I don't feel like doing it, or I'm too tired to do it. So I say, look, the most important thing you got to build first is the routine, the ritual.
Absolutely.
So if you choose a spot, like have a room in your house or a corner in your house or a place in your yard that you commit to doing your Tai Chi at. Master Fong Ha taught me that wherever you do your practice, you actually infuse that environment with chi, with your own life force. So as you do your meditation or do your Tai Chi or Qigong or whatever your Chi cultivation practice is, each time you go to that place, because it reverberates your own life force back to you, it actually acts like a wind that carries the bird up, like a convection current. So you get more out of it. But what I tell my students and patients is say, if you're tired, go to that place, set a timer for 20 minutes and take a nap.
Yeah.
But do it there.
Right.
If you have no desire to do anything but read a book and you're honestly going to cop out on your practice, sit in that place and read a book that has something to do with your personal and spiritual growth. Don't just read a magazine. If the best thing you can do is go there and beat your drum, do something that you're willing to do as a commitment to the routine, the ritual, and the practice of devoting time, energy, and attention to yourself. And you'll see that when you give yourself that permission, you take a lot of what is often self-generated pressure off of yourself. And so much of our culture has been damaged by our academic system where they're constantly under pressure to get good grades. Mom and dad are on top of them. The teacher's on top of them. So they start resenting to have to do something, not realizing that no one else is telling you to do this. This is something that you're making a choice of. So for all of you listening, the most important thing, and I'm happy to hear what you have to say, but you know, there's been many days in my life where I am absolutely exhausted from long, long hours of writing and researching and focusing or any number of things. And I will just go sit maybe on the rocks overlooking the pond, and I will just give myself permission to just drink in the beauty and listen to the sound of the water flowing and hear the birds chirping. And that is my meditation technique for the day.
Sure.
Because what I need is to come back to work with more energy than when I went to the meditation. But if I sit there and I'm doing some complex meditation technique or trying to stop my mind, I'll come back more tired and almost begin to resent the practice.
It's a good point.
Hello, and thank you to all of you for being here with me in Spirit Gym. Would you like to learn how to connect directly with your unconscious mind, soul, and highest self to gain guidance in your daily life and feel more grounded and spiritually connected? Are you ready to learn how to communicate with your soul and develop a language of direct communication that you can use to progressively develop your innate spiritual abilities such as clairvoyance, clairsentience, clairaudience, and intuition? Would you like a practical means of asking your own soul your deepest questions about all aspects of your life in general, or gain support from your soul in making critical decisions in your life? Would you feel safer asking important questions if you knew you weren't just using your ego mind, which is only about 5% of your consciousness, and were able to use all the consciousness within yourself? Well, if you've answered yes to any of these questions, then I have a very special offer for you. This August and September, I'll be offering my Tarot for Soul Guidance training program, in which I share specific methods of using tarot as a functional language to communicate directly with your soul as an online training program so that anyone can learn and practice in the comfort of their own home. I have deeply studied and practiced tarot for 10 years. Additionally, I've been working directly with my soul for my own guidance and to support others in their healing and spiritual journey and growth for over 20 years. I have taught thousands of my students and numerous clients and patients to connect to and get guidance directly from their soul using a range of approaches, including the use of tarot. I have not only seen people's lives and sense of trust in themselves improve dramatically in just a few months, I've received amazing feedback from each person that engaged these practices. Tarot for Soul Guidance is an online workshop specifically designed to make learning more enjoyable, easier, and give you specific practices you can work with between training sessions. This allows you to develop your skills in a step-by-step format and be able to ask all your questions so you feel grounded and confident in your Tarot for Soul Guidance practice. You will not only receive a comprehensive PDF manual with numerous diagrams for easier comprehension, but a series of video lessons that cover each of the major archetypes of tarot to support and reinforce your learning and practice. Tarot for Soul Guidance will be conducted online over 7 consecutive Fridays, starting August 8th and ending September 19th, for a total of 28 hours of training. All sessions will be recorded, so if you can't make a session for any reason, you can study and practice when it fits your schedule, and you can email me your questions and I will answer them in the upcoming online session, which is also recorded. There are many step-by-step developmental practices you will learn so that by the time you finish the 28-hour program, you'll be proficient in your practice of using tarot for soul guidance. You'll have a language for intimate connection with your soul for daily guidance, and I will teach you how to use tarot as a means of getting guidance and support from your soul in any aspect of your life, including how to gain an understanding of your future and what you may need to prepare for, how to conduct a daily reading and learn ways to best manage yourself to be in harmony with your highest intentions for yourself and others, how to gain information and guidance on how to make important decisions in your life, ways you can support others through soul-guided tarot communication, and how to progressively deepen your spiritual connection to your unconscious soul and highest self as a legitimate daily spiritual practice you can use anytime, anywhere. To find out more about the course and to register, go to paulchek.com/events/tarot. That's paulchek.com/events/tarot. If you are ready to learn to use your unconscious to its potential, deepen your connection to your soul and highest self, have a legitimate spiritual practice, and get support to live your dreams and be the person you came to the world to be, meet and learn others truly interested in being the best they can be and growing spiritually with them, then this workshop is for you. I look forward to seeing you in the training. Once again, to learn more and register, go to paulchek.com/events/tarot. That's paulchek.com/events/tarot. Can't wait to see you there. It's an amazing practice. I love it and use it every day.
I'll tell my guys the same thing. It's like all you have to do is put your ass on the cushion.
Mm-hmm.
If it's just for 1 second, then that's okay. But the fact of the matter is, if you get as far as putting your ass on the cushion, you'll probably stay.
Probably, yeah.
Because it actually, what are we after? We're after a space of no demand. And that's what you find when you cut through the weeds and just sit down with yourself. I've also found in my life personally, like I walked a lot of miles as like a very disciplined, I do this stuff because I got to do it. But I would fall off and find it difficult to be consistent because I had this like internal slave driver that was whipping me into self-development work, which is counterintuitive. As I've surrendered that internal operating system and I've come to this place where authentically I don't have to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
My sense of self-worth, my self-esteem is not bound up in any activities or spiritual activities that I do or don't do on a given day.
Right.
Paradoxically, I'm much more consistent in all of those rituals, behaviors, because there's no longer
a slave driver behind
a
it.
slave driver who's whipping me. I can do whatever I want.
Yeah.
I don't have to do anything. I can do whatever I want.
Yeah.
But because I have that internal sense of freedom, more and more often I choose to do the things that are aligned with my deepest intentions.
Well, I was just writing a note, so I didn't interrupt you, but one of the guiding principles that I use for myself is, say it's a day where I have committed myself to, doing Tai Chi for 100 days of, practicing a new technique or whatever. And some part of me wants to cop out on it. I just ask myself, what am I choosing to become? What am I choosing to become today? What am I choosing to become in the next month, the next year? What am I choosing to become for myself, for my family, for my friends, and for the world? And that's really an exercise in free will. You see, if you negate the meditation because you have a story of I have to, those are the words of a child. I choose to is the words of an adult based on Marshall Rosenberg's teachings in nonviolent communication, which is quite a profound upgrade in our way of relating to ourselves. But I always just remind myself, you're making a choice right now. Look at what you would rather do versus what you've committed yourself to doing, and ask which one of those is bringing you into the becoming that you choose out of your own free will. And the other thing I want to share for people that have a hard time with meditation is something quite cool. I took a course on contemplative meditation from a Christian priest who was a priest for like 60 years. And I wish I could remember his name, but he was really amazing. It was somebody that I was so grateful was in the world, because he was one of the few Christians that I really thought was a living example of the potential of Christianity. The other one is Father Thomas Keating, who died a little while back, but thank God Ken Wilber really gave him a lot of exposure, and so did Tammy Simon. You can actually find a couple of interviews with Tammy Simon on the Sounds True podcast with Father Thomas Keating. But the guy that I took the contemplative meditation course from said something really revealing. He said, we have a practice amongst Christian monks that's very simple. He said, all we do is try to count to 10 in our mind. And if we cannot make it to 10 without another thought jumping in, we have to go back and start at 1. And he said, Christian monks that have been meditating for 35 years can rarely count to 10 without another thought jumping in that's other than 6, 7. And there he's showing you that we have to develop the ability to focus and concentrate our mind so that we can guide it. But the reason I'm sharing it is if you have a hard time even counting to 10, know that monks of 35 years of practice still have a hard time.
Exactly. So that, I think, is a hindrance that I would love to disabuse people of, is that it takes work to establish concentration. What I teach people at the outset of practice is a breath counting strategy, similar to the one you just described.
Yeah.
Count exhales only from 1 to 8, and then count back down from 8 to 1. It's so simple.
Mm-hmm.
It's so simple. It's not easy. If you lose the count altogether or arrive at a number greater than 8, you know you've lost concentration. Start over again at number 1. I think typically with daily practice, month or 2, an individual can get to the place where they can remain concentrated in the count. Now, it's so simple, that practice, but it's so profound. Think about what's happening. You are being intentional with your attention. You're learning how to direct the mind from distraction back toward the object of concentration over and over and over. The mind wanders less and less in time and stays more completely with the object of concentration. You learn how to intensify your effort and really take what can be very a diffuse light of your consciousness, your awareness, your attention, and bring all your concentration power like a laser beam and just settle it right in on the breath and on the count, the felt sense of the body. The big one is you're cultivating metacognition, mentalizing, the capacity to discern moment by moment, where's your mind, which opens up a space where it starts to become more and more clear to you that you are not your mind, but you're the awareness in which your mind is operating.
Yes.
And from that space, you can start to more and more intentionally direct your mind on the task at hand. In that way, and then the meditation bell rings, let's say, practice is over. But in the same way that when you're working out, you're building muscle, and then you're done your workout for the day, you're still strong, right? Your muscles don't go away when the workout's over. So now you've developed this muscle of concentration, and you bring it into life. So whatever you're doing is getting the full dose of your concentration. Furthermore, when those habitual thoughts, judgments, criticisms emerge, you can detect them more and more rapidly and prevent them from coagulating into a whole complex that's going to bum you out. You can think your way into awful feelings.
Oh my God.
You can remove yourself from the neutrality of the present moment and create situations that are not real, and they will have a detrimental effect on your body, because although the situation may not be real, the emotions that your thoughts are generating are real.
Yeah.
And so you can, through consistent practice, you can uproot that whole system and no longer suffer your own thoughts.
There's also the thoughts that your emotions are generating, which is another reason why having a healthy body is really important in general, but also to aid your meditation practice. For example, if you've got an unhealthy liver, it can generate a lot of fear.
Absolutely.
If you have an unhealthy stomach, it can generate a lot of anxiety.
Right. So the meditation practice is addressing the issues from the outside, from the inside out, and the lifestyle modifications are addressing from the outside in.
Yeah.
And now you're entering this positive feedback loop of high vitality. You're no longer draining energy through unconscious thinking, and you're actually cultivating energy through the way that you're living. So in my frame, the real utility of a healthy lifestyle is to amplify your meditative skills so that you can have a greater sense of freedom in your own daily life, moment by moment by moment.
Yes. One of the things that's helped me, it took me a little while to grow into it, but I think it's a great thing to share with people, is that, if we can retain a sense of both observation of and humor of. There's times I've sat down and intended to meditate, but, my mind was all over the place. And so what I did is I came up with a name from my mind. I think of my mind like a dog that loves to chase everything. And I'll just call it Rover. I'll watch it running around and I'll say, Rover, come over here and lay down with me here. And I'll actually visualize this beautiful dog coming over, and I'll pet it and see if I can get it to calm down and lay down. And so by using a symbol that I can engage with, then I can calm my mind down. But the key point I'm working toward here is that I got to the point where I would just finish my meditation and go, wow, that was just truly amazing to watch, see, learn more about the inner nature of myself. Yeah. And so if you get to the point where you actually watch yourself like you'd watch a movie and say, well, today was a drama or a comedy or a murder mystery, you can actually go into meditation like you're stepping into your inner IMAX.
Totally.
And just say, let's see what's on the screen today.
Yeah, I think you're describing equanimity, the capacity to just be with whatever comes up and not need it to be any different than what it is, and just allow it to arise, exist for as long as it exists, and pass. But it's an interesting strategy with Rover. It reminds me of what they call the lion's gaze meditation. And the metaphor is, if you throw a stick at a puppy, what does it do? Or throw a stick to a puppy, what does it do? It'll chase the stick. But if you throw a stick to a lion, what does it do? It looks at the stick.
And then looks at you.
And then it looks back at you. The lion is more interested in where the stick comes from, rather than the stick itself. And so the stick is like thinking. And so we can be like puppies in our lives and chase our thoughts all over and analyze them and try to shrink our own brain and make sense of it all. Or we can become more like the lion, start to tune and attenuate to that space, that open, empty space of awareness from which thoughts arise and return to, and start to become a little more concerned with where the sticks come from than the sticks themselves.
Yeah, another thing that I've observed, I don't know if you've observed this at all. I'm by no means an astrologer, but I have spent a fair bit of time studying astrology to understand it. And I'm born on the cutoff between Leo and Virgo. In the Vedic system, I'm a Leo, but in the Western system, I'm right at the end of Virgo, transitioning to Leo. And so Virgos have very analytical minds, and Leos are, full of fire and full of themselves, And so,
sounds pretty accurate.
Yeah. I tell people I'm a picky lion. I'm analytical, picky, and I'm a lion, with all that. But, like I was married to a Capricorn for 17 years, and I really got to see the mind of a Capricorn. I've been around all these signs because as you learn them and you know how to see them, you can see, you can pretty much just hang out with someone for a few minutes. And if you have a basic gestalt of the constellations of the zodiac or the signs of the zodiac, you can fairly accurately guess who's a Libra, who's a Capricorn, who's a Scorpio. I've been in relationships with Scorpios, so I've got a good idea how those minds work. And my point is that I don't know if you've observed this, but I've seen by watching and asking and talking to people that a lot of their inner mental structure and the way they relate to themselves is very coherent with their birth sign.
Yeah, I don't know so much about it.
It's an interesting observation.
I think it is interesting, and I think in a previous chapter of my life, I might have just rolled my eyes at it and said, "Oh, this is all kind of not really for me." But the more I learn about it, the more I think it can be an accurate frame to understand yourself and understand people that you're in a relationship, especially if you find somebody knows what they're talking about when it comes to the zodiac. Because, I live in Venice Beach. I'll walk along the boardwalk, and there's a psychic. Every other person's a psychic. It doesn't mean that they know what they're talking about.
No.
But that also doesn't mean that the whole system is to be ignored.
I saw an excellent interview with a lady on Jeffrey Mishlov's podcast, The New Thinking Aloud, which for those of you, if you haven't been to The New Thinking Aloud on YouTube, it's phenomenal. The interviews with really top-notch people. Many, many years ago, I turned Jason Picard onto the New Thinking Aloud TV show because Jason's worked with me for 15 years. So before Jeffrey Mishlove took it off the air, but when he took it off the air, he had all the shows available on DVD once we transitioned from VHS to DVD. And Jason, as a gift to me, bought every single episode of many, many years. It was like 2 big boxes. I have them all here, and I've watched hundreds of them. But this woman was, I can't remember what type of astrologer she was. It was a kind of an unusual focus that I wasn't familiar with. But the interviewer said, well, how do you respond to this issue of so many people today thinking astrology is just airy-fairy, fluffy BS? She said, well, I'll tell you what I've learned. She said, I've met many people that believe that. But she said, I have never met a single person in my life that actually studied astrology that didn't believe in it.
Sure.
And that is the distinction right there. This is why I love, Jung has a quote, real thinking is hard work. That's why most people just rearrange their prejudices and call it thinking. And Bohm said almost the same thing.
I think you could say the same thing about meditation as she said about astrology.
Yeah.
I don't know anybody who actually gave it, a good investigation and maybe went on a meditation retreat that would then deduce that, this is airy-fairy. There's no real progress to be made here.
Well, the problem is that you could read for the rest of your life and not get through all the scientific research on meditation showing the benefits of it.
Sure.
I mean, you'd have to just be so caught in your own dogma to not, if you wanted to take a scientific approach to it from the question, does it work? You would have to be very, very caught in your dogma or your shadow to not say that this is so obvious that this works. I've got to give it a try.
Right. This is worthy of a serious investment in my time and energy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it too is a person has to get mature enough as a soul or as a person to get to the point in their life where they realize that their mind is actually often more problematic than it is supportive of their life.
Absolutely.
Hi, everybody. I hope you're enjoying the podcast as much as I am. I've got something great for you guys, especially for those of you like me that like to get into the gym and kick some butt once in a while, or go lift stones, or go for a hard workout in nature, or run, whatever it is you're up to, maybe even some intense lovemaking. Aubrey Marcus turned me on to a new product he recently created called Correct Fuel. It is really cool stuff, and it has ketone metabolites in it, which normally don't taste good, but this stuff tastes really good, and it really works. Literally within a minute of me drinking it, I felt, wow, I feel ready to go exercise. So I've got Aubrey here to tell us more about it because he's the expert. So Aubrey, tell me more and all of us more about Correct Fuel, because it's a very unique product, and I'm really quite impressed with it, quite frankly.
Well, thank you very much. The idea behind it was, what do we really need when we're actually out there? Like you said, kicking ass. For me, it's on the pickleball court or the basketball court or hiking Bear Mountain that's over here to my left.
Yeah.
And I always want electrolytes in my drink. So it's magnesium, potassium, calcium, but that's not enough. I want also the trace minerals that come from like sea salt. So we add an aquamin extract. So we put all that in, all those electrolytes. But what else do I want? Well, I wanted exogenous ketones. I wanted that ketone fuel to come in. And that was another thing that increases my clarity, increases my energy. And then one final piece of this puzzle was, how can we help train the body to actually burn fat as fuel on its own? So it's actually an extract that you can find in green beans that they actually isolated that helps train the body to burn your own fat as fuel. So this is by no means a weight loss product, and that's not what we're claiming, but it's really giving you not only the electrolytes to replace anything that you've lost when you're sweating or when you're working hard, but also the exogenous ketones to give you that clarity and fuel, and then also subtly training your body to do the very same thing. So it's a really unique combination of a lot of things in one packet that tastes great, that you can bring in your water bottle or whatever you're using. And it'll really just support you throughout your workout, throughout your day, however you want to use it.
Well, I love it. And Kyle Kingsbury, our soul brother, was just here, and he was using it regularly, and he was singing its praises to me regularly. And I'm very glad I've got a hold of it and tried it, because I'm very specific about these things, but I really feel very, very good about how I feel with it, how it tastes. And I think there's just a great opportunity for a lot of people to take their exercise and even their energy and even their metabolism to a new level. So for those of you that want to try Correct Fuel, go to korrectlife.com/spirit gym and get 15% off on your first offer.
And I would say, sorry to cut you off, but maybe not. I mean, if I look back on my own life, mature is not the right reason that I was called to a deeper dive into meditation. Perfect kind of proportion of pain, existential anguish, you know, a complete inability to find peace within myself or love myself, and continually finding myself in real world trouble that had serious consequences because my own mind seemed to have a mind of its own, and I couldn't get a handle on it.
Yeah, I think you shared that in Kyle's podcast. Some of the stuff was great to listen to that.
And I think that that's pretty common. Deep practitioners, I have a teacher who would always say, if you extrapolate the population on a bell curve, on this side, you have people who are really, really struggling. On this side, extreme side, you have people who are, you know, they've won the game basically. And in the middle, you just have, you know, things aren't so great. They're not so bad. It's just kind
getting
of
along.
Yeah, getting along. But it's those individuals at the extreme that are called to a deep practice. One side because they're suffering greatly. The other side is because they've achieved all the things that they were taught that if they achieve them, then life will be smooth sailing, but it's not.
Right.
And so they know that there's got to be something deeper. I don't know what it is, but I'm willing to just sit still for 5 days and see what comes up.
Yes.
But the average individual in the middle there just isn't, there's no catalyst for, you know, revolutionary action.
Yeah, the other thing that I think helps people over the hump, and when I use the word meditation, I mean any real inner work practice, be it static, dynamic, etc. I know, well, my pathway to meditation came through the need to alleviate pain. And I was taught meditation when I was 12 by the Self-Realization Fellowship monks, which I think was just really important at my life at that stage. But what actually, if I had to say what is my biggest motivator for meditative type practices, it's because I have a genuine interest in doing the best that I can do at what I'm doing. I am someone who believes if you're going to do it as well as you can, or why bother?
Mm-hmm.
And in order for me to be a good writer or a good teacher or a good father or a good athlete, when I was a fighter, I used to spend a lot of time meditating on my opponent and going through, after watching video of them or watching them fight, I would go through in my mind, okay, if he, throws a double jab at me and he's a lot taller than me, how could I counter punch that? And so I would go through scenarios, which is a sort of a form of active meditation. But the point I'm driving at is that I came to the realization that the mind is so fundamental to the development of and mastery of any skill.
Yeah.
That I know a lot of guys in my athletic career who spent as much time as I did training, but never really grew very much. I know guys that have been in boxing gyms and martial arts dojos for years and years and years, and even got high belts, but were no problem for me to just dismantle because they had sort of climbed the, shall we say, the social architecture. I used to hate when masters would give out belts for attendance.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you've been here a year, so you can.
Your dues are on time. Time to
your
advance
dues,
your belt.
yes, yeah. And so, but meanwhile, I'm like, when I used to race motocross and race stock cars, meditation was very, very helpful to me because things happen so fast you can't process with your conscious mind.
Sure.
You have to go to another level.
Right.
Like we used to have to spar with, and when I was on the Army boxing team, we had to spar with 3 weight classes below and 3 weight classes above us.
Oof.
And the guys that I hated the most were lightweights, the little guys. They'd hit you 3 times before you even saw where the punches came from. I'm like, what the hell? This is like being in a fly storm.
I've had the same experience with the little guys.
And so you can't watch the punches. They're too quick. You have to kind of go to a metacognitive state and work with your intuitive self. And so the point I'm trying to push through here to clarity is that I find that the commitment to doing well at anything generally has to come with the practice of learning to use your mind in ways that facilitate that pathway.
Exactly.
Like I have damn near killed myself stacking rocks, and it can be wickedly dangerous. And people say, why do you do that? It's so dangerous. I said, that's exactly why I do it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know if I'm not fully present, I might kill myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I have left a lot of blood in the rock garden, and I never blame anybody. I don't even get upset at the rocks. I just say, thank you, Stone Buddhas, for teaching me where I was not present or where my ego was guiding the show, which is really dangerous to do in a lot of areas. And so the beauty is I can use the act of stacking rocks or the act of lifting weights or the act of painting as the meditation to support that exact practice. But it's a matter of how you relate to your mind.
Yeah.
So you can do it mindlessly or you can do it mindfully.
It's just like what I said earlier, amplifying concentration and your capacity to be present will improve your performance across the board at whatever it is that you're doing.
Yes.
And it's a very interesting point that you made about the athletes you used to compete against and just kind of walk through. I've worked with athletes before, and I'll ask them, if you imagine one of your greatest performances, all athletes know what it is to be in the zone and just be flawless. in this kind of altered state of consciousness and perform at the highest level. And you ask them, looking back, do you think that was a function of your physical training? Or do you think that you tapped into some kind of altered perceptual experience that your mind wasn't getting in the way of, the highest expression of your skill? And across the board, they'll say, oh, it was definitely an altered mental state, high concentration. And then you ask, what proportion of your training is mental compared to physical? And the mental training is either non-existent or it's a very small proportion, but by their own admission, they just said that their highest performance was a shift in consciousness.
Yes.
And so the flow state is just high, continuous concentration. And that's a skill that can be developed and actually baselined as the normal basis of operation from which you approach the demands of your life.
Yes, and one of the things that I teach many people, especially people that don't do well just witnessing their mind or trying to come from a place of stillness, and there's research showing this because I've studied it, that is any activity that is repetitive or cyclical movement, but it has to be a movement that's consistent, like running. You're just running down the road, rowing. You don't have to worry about if you're going to fall out of the boat, riding a bicycle, particularly in areas where you don't have to worry about a lot of traffic or things like that, like maybe somewhere out in the countryside, or a spin bike. I used to go into altered states of consciousness skipping rope in my boxing training because I would skip rope an hour a day.
Wow.
And once you're, what the research shows and what I found through a lot of practice is that the secret to opening the gate to the flow state is that you got to give the ego something to focus on that's just enough that it can't let go.
Yeah.
Or you'll fall off the treadmill, or you'll fall off the rowing machine.
I know exactly what you mean.
But that the ego gets cocky and thinks, I got this. And so what it does, it goes into a hypnagogic state where it's half in and half out.
Mm-hmm.
There's just enough monitoring the rowing machine or the bicycle to keep you there. But it's easy enough. The ego says, I got this. And then it just starts to go to sleep.
Exactly.
And so I found with a lot of people, introducing them to meditation through repetitive cyclical movements in an environment, like it's a lot harder to do that on a cross-country trail where you got to, watch out for rattlesnakes and twigs sticking out and rocks that you can trip on. But running along the beach and having the sound of the waves and just being able to empty yourself, or rollerblading is
one of my favorite
fantastic
one of my favorite ways to facilitate that mind state with my clients and students is Kali, Filipino martial art. We have the double sticks.
Mm-hmm.
And as part of the training, you do a drill called Sinawali, where you're doing a combination together and you're actually hitting each other's sticks. But the combinations get pretty complex because there's a lot of cross patterning. You have your right hand on the left side of your body, your left hand on the right side of your body. And it takes a lot of cognitive ability to get it at first.
Mm-hmm.
But once you start to groove it, it becomes kind of habitual. And just like you described, and this is what I always say, you got to be here while you're doing it. If your mind wanders, you're going to lose it. But if you get too cocky, you're also going to lose it. So it creates this very fertile mind state where you have to be intimately involved with what you're doing, but not trying too hard.
Yeah.
And then that mind state that you find, you bring it with you when you put the sticks down. It's a very fertile ground of pristine present moment attention without too much effort.
I think that's one of the reasons walking for a lot of people is a great way to meditate. If you can walk where there's not a lot of like traffic and...
Yeah, I walk on the beach every morning early. It's my favorite part of the day.
And I learned a cool technique. I practiced for a long time and do still occasionally practice and teach slow walking. And we do that in HLC training with you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the goal there is walk as slow as you can, but not so slow that you start falling over, because then you have to constantly focus on not falling over. But then time your steps to your breathing. So you might find your natural rhythm is 3 steps to the inhale, 1 step at the top of the breath, 3 steps to the exhale, 1 step, pause. But you just walk and time yourself. But Dr. Oliver taught me an amazing little technique that I think is worth sharing. He said, as you're walking, spend a minute or two focusing on what you're hearing in your left ear, which activates your right brain hemisphere. Then switch to listening as much as you can through only your right ear, which activates the left hemisphere. And after you do that 2 or 3 times, it integrates your hemispheres. It actually makes it really easy to get into these flow states, altered states, sort of a meditative, a meta awareness of yourself, where you can start finding yourself. You can have really interesting experiences, like you have to look at this as poetry, but I've had the experience that the trail created me so it could have the experience of being walked on. Or that my race car, I used to have real deep meditations when I raced a stock car in the car. Again, because things are happening too fast, you can't think it out. You know, when you're going almost 100 miles an hour heading into a corner and everybody's trying to knock you out of the way, you have to watch sometimes 4 or 5 cars ahead of you because you got a very, very short period of time. If you see a car accident coming, to figure out how do you get around it without getting caught in a 20-car pileup. But you just, I would have the experience and it would be very strange for me, but whenever I race motocross or race stock cars or even drag raced, I found that there's an actual spirit of the machine. There's a real spirit of the motorcycle, a spirit of the car, a spirit of, even when I raced bicycles and triathlons, I felt there was a spirit, and that somehow the spirit had participated in the creation of me so that it could experience the joy of racing or the joy of exercise or whatever. And when you have these experiences, they're actually very profound. The problem is that they bring you up against a lot of people's beliefs about reality. Like, a materialist would say you're an idiot if you think there's a spirit in a car or a bicycle or whatever. And so you can have experiences that defy common sense from the perspective of our kind of everyday upbringing. But I think that's how we grow spiritually. It's like when we get put up against the consensus and the belief systems that people live, and it's as though spirit itself is breaking down the walls and saying, like I shared with you this morning the book of my communications with the spirit of this house. And many of my friends, they're like, how could you talk to the spirit of a house? And I literally teach them how to do it. And some of them are open enough to be able to do it. But I show them and say, okay, read this book, which I just conversations with the spirit of this house. I remember Mimi and Chase were here once, and they read a bunch of it. I said, just let your soul guide you to any page. And they were both just blown away. And a lot of my friends were like, this came from the spirit of a house. And I say, I'll tell you what's even more trippy. There's stuff in there that I have no idea. I couldn't even imagine it because I don't know I don't know the answers to these questions. It's not, in other words, what I'm saying is my mind is not generating a phantom and calling it a spirit of a house because I don't know even how to imagine the answers to some of the questions and some of the things it's saying. And when you come to face with something like that, you realize there's just so much more going on in life.
So much more information that's available to you if you just engage the practice to soften your boundaries and edges.
And I would go beyond that and say living information and experience. Because, information a recipe on how to make a certain type of pancake or cake doesn't really open you up to some magical experience. Like, how do you put your program your phone? Most people aren't going to have a mystical experience programming a phone or a new software thing. But when you're in the presence of, like, when stones start talking to you, many of my friends that I've taught to Rockstack would admit to me, when you told me that the stones would talk to you, I used to think you were crazy. And I used to even wonder why I was paying money to take a class from you.
But then, I don't wonder if you're crazy, Paul. I know it.
Well, thank God. But often it takes about 6 months of regular work with the stones. And I've had probably now at least 6 people get a hold of me with a very excited email or phone call going, "You're not going to believe it. I finally know what you're talking about. The stones are telling me what to do, and I'm being able to make things that I could never make before, and I don't even know how it's happening, but the stones are telling me," right? So that's a level of meditative awareness that shows you that there is, well, it supports pantheism, that God is in everything.
Sure, I know in the Native American spiritual tradition, they call them the rock people.
Yes.
And in, forget where exactly it is in one of the Buddhist texts, but they talk about when the stone Buddhas start moving, you're getting closer to awakening in reality.
Yeah.
And yeah, I would agree that through cultivating strong, continuous concentration, preventing mind from wandering, and really, really developing the skill of relaxation.
That's, I think,
fully
that's
relax,
critical thing.
fully relax into the ground of the present moment. You perceptually experience that there's nothing solid.
Mm-hmm.
It's all breathing and waving.
Totally.
And it's not separate from you. You're it.
Yeah.
And all of this stuff comes online as a direct experience, not as a platitude that you read in the book or someone else told you. But it comes online only because you were willing to persevere through the very mundane practice of just sitting still and clarifying your own mind. It's all very natural. It's ordinary. It's the inevitable consequence of seeing reality as it is.
I think you find that the ordinary becomes extraordinary.
Totally.
And
extraordinary. Supernatural.
Yeah.
It's not special. It's the way it is.
Yeah.
And you can start to glimpse ultimate reality. And you still get to be a normal, regular, everyday person. You can still be an accountant or whatever you are. It's not like you need to...
It's just a lot more awake.
Yeah, you don't need to grow out your beard all long and become a wizard or anything. No one else really needs to even know what's happening in your perceptual experience.
Yeah.
But you know, and it changes your conceptualization of yourself in the world, which changes your behavior, which changes the way you interact with people, and you become, you orient toward the bodhisattva. St. Francis of Assisi said, wherever you go, preach the gospel. If it's absolutely necessary, use words. And so you don't need to go around teaching people how to meditate or telling people that they should meditate. It's just your boundaries and edges, the things that you think you know, start to soften. And you walk through the world with a more deeper into the mystic side of it all.
Yeah, you leave less of a footprint. One of the paradoxes of meditation and a lot of the things we've been talking about is that just as you need a level of concentrated focus, you need its complementary opposite, which is open receptivity. For example, if I tell you the stones will start talking to you and in your head, you just simply disbelieve that, you've already killed the open receptivity.
Sure.
You've put a wall around yourself. They've shown, for example, with placebo tests, that if someone has a staunch belief that the placebo won't work, it will not work.
Totally, yeah.
And so, there's classes on spoon bending, and I've read books where people that teach spoon bending or metal bending with your mind, things that, shouldn't be doable. And I've seen many pictures and even videos of people, especially kids, literally taking a spoon that's stiff enough that, I might be able to just bend it in half with a lot of strength, but they roll it up
I've seen it too.
perfectly,
Yeah.
like it was made of clay. And so what they find is that adults have a very hard time learning that, but kids learn it very easily because the kids do not have these limiting beliefs in the way.
Sure.
People ask me all the time, how do you remote view? And I say, the first thing you got to do is remote view is believe that it's possible. Because if you don't believe it's possible, you'll spend the rest of your life trying to remote view. And all you're going to do is view your mind, your own biases. But the point I'm making is that there's this strange paradox of concentrated focus, yet open receptivity, because they're almost opposite qualities.
Yeah.
And so I think one of the ways to deal with the paradox is just I have to focus when I'm painting. I have to focus when I'm stacking rocks. But I sort of, as a metaphor, leave the windows open.
It's a good way to put it.
If a bird wants to fly in, I want to say, hi, thanks for joining me, And, I've had very strange things happening doing Tai Chi, for example. I don't know if I ever told you the story, but I just finished doing Tai Chi and I was having a meeting with my instructors from all over the world. And we were about to start a drum circle because I'd start each day with a drum circle. And as I was walking along the side of the house up at the Heaven House, and they were all waiting for me, so they were looking at me, and a bird flew up and landed on my right shoulder, and a great big lizard that was on the wall of the house jumped on my left shoulder. And my students are like, oh my God. And I'm walking along with one little hitchhiker on each shoulder. And they're like, why in the world does that happen to you? How does that happen to you? And I say, everything in nature knows when it's safe with you. And when you learn to get out of your head and see and feel God in everything, then nature is attractive to that safety and that security. And all these creatures are as curious about you as you are about them.
Sure.
And so it's not that I'm doing anything magical. It's just that I'm open to the magic.
I have a friend, a good friend, who's a highly skilled outdoorsman, survivalist, Will Sechko. He'll take guys out into the woods and teach them, primitive skills. Mm-hmm. Hunting being one of them, but he teaches that you need to kind of familiarize yourself with this open, diffuse, kind of peripheral sense of awareness.
Yes.
And navigate through the forest with that, because if you're very concentrated, focused, angular, myopic, it's penetrating. And he'll say, did you ever feel somebody's eyes on you?
Of course.
You turn around, it's an energetic kind of, it can be felt. Mm-hmm. And so you're scaring all the animals away. They feel that.
Yeah.
But as you just kind of relax into yourself and become more diffuse, they'll come right up to you.
Yeah. It's the same when I'm analyzing a mandala and I'm teaching people how to analyze a mandala. I said, the first thing you got to do is not think about the mandala. You've got to feel what it's doing to you. So when you look at it, don't look at it and say, there's a house, there's a cross, there's a crown, there's a blackbird. You have a soft, receptive gaze, and you drink it in, and you invite it into you. So, for example, when as you've seen me do many times with interpretations, the first thing I do is neutralize myself, which the shaman call emptying the bone. It means get rid of any mental activity, emotional activity of my own. It's like calibrating an instrument, so it's zeroed out and it's accurate. Then I just let the imagery into me. And if all of a sudden my small intestines start to get wound up, I know, okay, this person's probably got food intolerance or gastrointestinal inflammation, leaky gut syndrome, but they got some kind of digestive disorder. Or if my heart gets real heavy, or my brain starts to ache, or I get ringing in but anyhow, what happens is whatever's going on in them because they're who painted the mandala, you cannot separate yourself. The energy of the person is imprinting itself into the mandala. So it's really, we're painting a homeopathic for ourselves. Just, if you have the symptoms of the flu and you eat a plant that produces the symptoms of the flu, the two energy vectors are almost identical, so they cancel each other out through destructive interference. So when a person's actually painting a mandala for a healing process and they just allow what rises up from them, they will actually paint the frequency of what it is they're trying to heal, so that when the energy comes into their body through the sight system and through the light system of the body, it cancels the energy that's causing the problems. But the point I'm making is that there's this need for an open receptivity and not to focus and judge and analyze, but to allow your perceptual faculty to embrace whatever it is without any trying to direct it. Just
almost to merge.
Yeah, just let it come into you and do what it wants to do inside of you.
So it's a really great point, and I think, like, we began this narrative here with the paradox of sharp focus and open, diffuse awareness.
Yes.
But I think what you said is, like, when you're analyzing a mandala, for example, the first thing you do is empty yourself.
Yes.
Become the hollow bone.
Yes.
That's where the sharp focus comes in. You have to have this capacity to cut.
Yes.
Conceptualization.
Yeah.
Let everything go. That's the sharp, narrow focus.
Yeah.
But that sharp, narrow focus actually matures and graduates in this capacity to open fully and to see. One of the metaphors they'll say in the meditations is the way the child looks at the temple, seeing everything at once and nothing in particular.
Right.
So you're not zeroing in on anything, but because you've developed that capacity to stay, you train your mind to stay through vigilant effort. Now you can relax that effort altogether and become very, very open, very, very wide. And you can receive a lot of information that's right there. It's right in front of your face, but it's only there because you've cultivated the ability to empty yourself.
Well, the other thing, too, that this is a step forward in that, and that is that with practice, what you learn is that what needs your focus calls to you. Like, I might be in this empty state, walking on my meditation trail here on the property, but something flirts with me. Something calls to me. And I turn and look, and there's a rattlesnake 3 feet from me, but I didn't see it at all. So our soul or our spirit, when I'm doing mandala analysis, I connect to the soul of the individual and say, I'm here to support you. So help make me aware of whatever it is that you would like me to be aware of. So I might be in this open, unfocused gaze, but all of a sudden, without any direction by me, I'm drawn to the fact that somewhere in the corner they painted a skull where I didn't even see it. But all of a sudden now the skull is calling to me. And so then I say, to the soul of the individual that painted the mandala. I say, so what would you like me to see here? What is it? You're bringing my attention to this little tiny skull hidden in the corner under a tree over here. Yes, ask them about when their father died and how they feel about that today. And boom, tears are rolling, and but it only took just a tiny little image that I didn't even actually cognitively see, but spirit drew me to it.
It's like precognitive.
It's precognitive,
Yeah.
But in this case, it's different than precognitive. It's the soul of that individual communicating to me. The rattlesnake would be a precognitive awareness that my unconscious was aware that it was there, but I wasn't. And so, you could call it our nature interacting with its larger nature. And so all of a sudden, the unconscious says, there's the rattlesnake of you over there. Be careful. Michael, phenomenal dialogue. Thank you. It's great to get into all these things together. And I hope the listeners are richly rewarded. It's great to be able to talk to someone who has a real depth of not only understanding, but experience with this, with these variety of inner paths. My next question takes a slightly different direction. Angeles Arrien, in her excellent book titled The Fourfold Way, Walking the Paths of Warrior, Teacher, Healer, and Visionary, which, as a side note, is an excellent book, everybody listening. She describes the use of meditation in the seated, lying, and standing positions. Personally, aside from these three positions she offers in her book, I find that dynamic meditations that suit my kinesthetic orientation are helpful. I developed the zone exercises in my book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy, to share with busy minds that often don't do well without some form of body movement. As we've been discussing so far today, I love meditation while walking, lifting stones, lifting weights, working with the animals, such as milking the goat or even doing the dishes. Can you share your thoughts on the different positions Angeles Arrien covers and the use of dynamic meditations and what you feel is ideal with each of these positions, sitting, lying, standing, or moving, is ideal for based on your own experience?
Yeah, I think that you're accurate. It's like what we discussed earlier. Meditation is being intentional with your attention. That doesn't imply that you need to be sitting still with your eyes closed. However, I think initially, to cultivate the requisite skills, attentional skills for fruitful meditation practice, it is a good idea to spend at least 10 minutes sitting still or lying down with the eyes closed, because when you open the eyes and engage activity, you're inviting a lot more distraction. There's the formal meditation practice, and then, like we described earlier in this conversation, there's the mixing practices, where you take the skills that you developed on the cushion and you engage daily life activities that you find it's not so difficult to stay tethered to that ground of open, empty awareness. So, for example, for me personally, I sit every morning, but just for like 25, 30 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
But I have about a 4 or 5 hour block in my morning where it's a very meditative, I'm cooking, I'm measuring out my supplements, my phone is not on, and there's no tech, because I find it very difficult personally to be engaged with emails and the phone and everything and maintain and not get too distracted.
Yeah.
So I think that for individuals who are more kinesthetically oriented in their relationship to their mind and body, that movement is fine. Painting, exercising, all of that. But it's a good idea to, I think, be still, sitting or lying down, then maybe walking, and then maybe exercising, painting, those mixing practices. Really, I think, the masters on the path, there's no distinction between meditation and non-meditation.
Right.
It's, like I said earlier, the utility of the practice is not to become a good meditator. It's to become a fully alive, fully expressed human being. And so as your formal practice deepens, there's less of a distinction between the way you are in your meditation practice and the way you are when the bell rings.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, Shinzen used to say there's a figure ground reversal. It's like in the early stages of an exploration of a meditative discipline, your meditation is something that occurs during your day. But as practice deepens, this figure ground reversal happens where your day is something that occurs within the context of an unbroken meditation.
Right.
So really anything that you can do meditatively. Anything. Making love, having an argument in traffic, pooping, all of it. As long as you're fully grounded in the experience of the present moment and you're fully immersed in what you're doing and your attention is where your body is, it can be a meditation. But I think to get to that point, you do want to ground your attention in a formal practice.
Yeah.
It's it's hard, I think, to say, well, my mind's not really built for sitting still, so I'm going to start my meditation with painting or with exercise. I think initially it's a good idea to hold yourself to the standard of a minimum of, let's say, 10 minutes per day of seated meditation practice.
Mm-hmm. In the book, she gives some very specific applications for the standing, the seated, and the lying position. But one of the things that I would like to throw out for the listeners, I'm quite sure you're aware of this, but the body is a living antenna system. And, when I was younger, we didn't have cable. So if you wanted to watch the television, we lived on Vancouver Island where the weather can be quite stormy, and you'd often would have to, if you were trying to watch the TV, all of a sudden the signal would go fuzzy. You'd get up and you'd have to move the aerials or change the length of an aerial and keep playing around until all of a sudden the signal came clear. And so when you look at the science of yoga or Chinese medicine, what you find is they're very aware that the body is an antenna, and each asana puts you in a different posture, which changes the frequencies that you're receiving in the broad spectrum of, what we can receive in consciousness and from the environment. I've also got 2 books written by, I can't remember the lady's name, but the entire books are on which postures to use to access different dimensions of reality or different types of spirits or different deities or how to access people in the afterlife. And having explored that, it's very, very helpful to know these postures. So I think that if nothing else, if people experimented with these different practices and paid attention to what they're able to perceive in one posture versus another posture, asana versus another posture, another asana. In Chinese medicine, you have a wide variety of different postures or gestures or movements to use in order to channel energy into the liver or the kidney or the gallbladder or the spleen, etc., because each of them has their own resonant frequency, which is well borne out in science. That's well known now. There's so much in science that shows that the ancients knew exactly what they were doing.
Absolutely.
But I think that it's just important to remember that sometimes something inside of us has an awareness that our conscious mind doesn't have. Like, for example, you might have a habit of sitting on a cushion, but all of a sudden there's a strong impulse in you to stand and meditate.
Mm-hmm.
My first gong practice given to me by Master Fong Ha was called Zhang, I believe it is, which translates to stand like a tree. So my practice was to stand like a tree for an hour a day for 100 days straight. And did I ever tell you the story when I first went to meet him?
I don't remember.
It's real funny. He lives in San Francisco, so he said, come on up, and I asked him to help me create a series of dynamic meditations that were so simple anybody could do it because of the problems of people being so trapped in their head and all the health problems that was causing them. And he loved the idea. So I worked with him for about 3 years, but when I went to his house and he opened the door, I saw this short, stocky Chinese man that was quite buff. And the first thought through my head is, he looks just like Yoda. And as I stepped into his house, on the left side of the hallway, when you come in the door, was a great big poster of Yoda. And I just cracked up laughing. And he looks at me like, why are you laughing? And I said, you know what? The first thing I thought when I saw you is you look like Yoda. And there you got a picture of Yoda right here. He said, yes, many people have said that to me. But he took me out in his backyard and he said, let's get your posture right. And he showed me how to position my hands. And he said, no, that's all I want you to do. I'll come back and check on you in a while. So I'm out there, 5 minutes goes by, 10 minutes goes by. And I'm like, wow, he's giving me some kind of a test, but I'm going to just enjoy it, So finally, an hour later, he comes out And he walks up with a big smile. He says, "Very good, Paul, very good." He says, "You know, most people cannot do that for more than a minute." And I said, "Wow." He said, "Yeah, their bodies are so weak they can't deal with gravity for a minute." He said they'll end up getting on the floor, or laying down, or going for a walk, but they typically can't handle more than a minute. And he said to me, "I found when people come to me that are really sick, they often can't even stand for 1 minute. And I can tell how well they're progressing in their healing by how long they can hold the posture for this meditation." But it was just a funny example of, see, he chose a standing meditation for me because he was trying to develop enough strength in a field of gravity to help my body be able to have the discipline to hold any meditative focus. And we did a variety of different techniques of different types. But, you know, I think the point being is that there are different applications for each of these classes of positions: standing, seated, lying, moving. But that when one has the awareness that the body is a living antenna system, one of the things that I did in my own practice for many years is I would, and if you haven't tried this, it's really wild. Go, for example, next to a fig tree, or, you know, because the different trees have different natures. If you go next to a palm tree, there's no branches. It's just a long trunk with a crown on the top, and you'll have a very different experience. But I would just empty myself, and I would connect to the spirit of the tree, say, "I'd like to meditate with you. Please guide me." And what I would find is that just the way blood flows through our arteries, that life force energy flows through a tree. And my body would start to move, and all of a sudden my right arm would go up, and I noticed it would follow a branch to its end. Then it would come back and go down, and then it would go up, and then my left arm would follow a branch on the other side of the tree. And I found that the tree was actually showing me how its own life force moves through the tree. And I would have, all of a sudden, I would feel like I was completely one with the tree. So there's an example of detaching from having to sit, stand, or lie down.
Exactly. I would say that's a great example and totally appropriate for you and where you are in your development, and how you can just kind of dispense with the traditional practice and just let your intuition guide you into some pretty far out stuff. You know, you're just moving like a tree.
Mm-hmm.
I would say for a beginner, that could be a slippery slope into just simply being bored with sitting still,
Mm-hmm.
and then allowing yourself to start to entertain yourself with, oh, let me just dance like a tree, or different mudras for different. It can almost be like you're trying to entertain yourself rather than just let yourself really settle in
Mm-hmm.
to the ground of your being. Once you allow yourself to settle in, then you can start to explore more intuitive practices. But at the outset, I think my fear for a lot of individuals would be that they would be allowing their monkey mind ego disguised as a spiritual insight to prevent them from soaking into a very mundane and boring practice
Mm-hmm.
that will eventually open up to a very transcendent experience of reality. And before that they pay the dues in the sitting still practice, they're dancing like a tree, when that's really not probably the appropriate practice for them at that point in time.
Yeah, there's always a different range of responses, because I've had groups, and like some of my Zen in the Gardens, I have one called Rock and Soul. So half of it is the inner practices and these types of things. And the other half, first is the soul, then the rock, because I want them to connect to the soul and to the consciousness of the environment, so that when they go to lift rocks, that the soul comes with them. But one of the techniques that I developed too long ago for me to remember, which my body taught me, which interestingly happened after I had my first few DMT experiences, is I would wake up in the middle of the night and my body would be reliving the experience of coming into union with the universe and then God. But I would feel all the tension in my body very strongly. And it was so intense that I would get up in the middle of the night. Interestingly enough, this happened 12 times in a row at exactly 2:38 a.m. to the letter. As soon as it started to come on, I could feel the dissolve happening, like literally like I just took a hit of DMT. I look at the clock and it'd be 2:38. So I always found that really cool. But I would go outside and I call it unwinding. And I would just empty myself and allow my body to guide me to whatever position it needed to be in.
Totally.
And I would be out there oftentimes for 90 minutes, 2 hours. I'd be drenched in sweat. My body would be taking me into various postures that might be releasing the fascia of the latissimus dorsi or the lumbothoracolumbar fascia or any part of me that needed to be released. And I've been able to take, countless classes of absolute beginners and say, all I want you to do is just bring your consciousness into your body and feel wherever you're tight. And to begin with, just like if you feel tension in your abdominals, practice leaning back as far as you can, holding that posture, and then breathing diaphragmatically to expand your belly, which will stretch your abdominals. Then as you exhale, let your body come back up. And within a short period of time, you'll feel like an invisible guide, and all of a sudden you'll be going down and touching your toes. And then you might be twisting. I found there was very few people that within 15 minutes could not feel their body guiding them.
I do the same thing, and I facilitate the same experience on my retreats. It's we can make movement so conceptual, so heady, so intellectual.
Yeah.
But it's very profound when you just give the steering wheel to the intelligence of your body and move and breathe the way you want to move and breathe. I find that that's a really great idea to have a nonlinear movement practice like that in place before your sitting practice.
Yes.
To really breathe and move the body open. It doesn't need to make sense. It doesn't need to look balanced or coherent. Just move.
Yes.
I'll set the timer. If I'm going to do a 30-minute practice, the first 5 minutes is just nonlinear movement.
Yes, it's beautiful.
Yeah. I would say one analogy came to me after you asked the question around experience of yourself moving with the tree, or getting outside the formal period of practice and bringing it into life. To use a martial art analogy or a boxing analogy, you might have a high-level guy at your gym who breaks all the rules, but it works for him.
Mm-hmm.
He drops his hand because he moves his head really well, and he doesn't necessarily practice the fundamentals, but he's got good enough at the rules that he can now not follow the rules.
Break the rules,
But you might have some novice come into the gym and say, oh, look at that guy. He's really good. He's got his hands down. What's going to happen to him?
Knock out.
Yeah, so it's similar to that. Like, I think there is something to be said for just bringing some equanimity to the uncomfortability, not just physically, but mental, emotional, of just sitting still with no stimulus. And then to invite your practice off the cushion into life. But first grounded and just sit with yourself.
Yeah, I think to sit with yourself is an expression of being with yourself. People can sit with themselves all day long, but if they're not being with themselves, now they're just sitting and wishing they were somewhere else usually. But, well, we've covered a lot, and I have a fair bit more to cover, but you and I have had such a great dialogue. I think we've actually probably covered a lot of the things that we would have talked about, but there's one kind of closing exploration I think is really important to get into, and that relates to the two common problems I've seen and had to help meditators with through in the years as a therapist and a life coach, which are A, escape from the real challenges of life through meditation. I find meditation to present many of the same challenges of plant medicine use and ceremonies. People see their shadow, misgivings, and challenges inherent in their life, but often think that because they've seen these challenges that they're now addressed. Next, many people see but don't do the real work of growth and development within the context of their relationship to themselves, others, and life in general. In fact, I've seen a paradoxical reaction among many meditators. They see their own darkness and challenges, and instead of engaging these issues in their life, they just meditate more and more and longer and deeper, yet in actual fact don't engage the challenges at the ground level of their life. So I know that's a lot, but can you sort of share your thoughts in regard to maybe the first one is seeing the issues but not
Totally
doing the work?
Yeah, I think that like anything else, work, drugs, alcohol, sex, you can use meditation or spiritual work as an avoidance strategy.
Yeah.
And many people do. The utility of the practice, I think, is it'll facilitate the confrontation with unexamined parts of yourself, but then you need to address the issues.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people, a pitfall that I've seen is the notion that meditation can just fix everything.
Right.
And actually, it's not true. You know, there are situations where hiring a therapist is a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
Or, you know, you might have to make some significant lifestyle adjustments to your daily life. You cannot meditate your way out of any issue.
Bad relationship
Bad
skills.
relationship, yeah. So, and actually you can see it too when you look at, you might have a highly realized teacher, let's say, who can kind of guide students to transcendent states or really be a fountain of wisdom with regard to the practice, but their personal life could be in shambles. You know, becoming a deep practitioner doesn't automatically create a healthy personality.
No.
So you can address the deeper structures of the ego and contact ultimate reality through deep practice, but you can still be a pretty jacked up individual. Yeah. And so there's the path of waking up and the path of cleaning up, growing up, and they're not the same.
Right.
And a fully integrated person who's whole is paying due diligence to all of those arenas. One of my teachers says, you want to have insight as vast as the sky and conduct as fine as barley flour. And that requires work outside of your meditation. You know, you can't just go and retreat and everything's going to fix itself.
Right. Yeah, these are very important points. And I think just like meditation can show you the door to the work and plant medicines can, you can use both of them as escapes. I countless is the number of people that just keep going from ayahuasca ceremony to ayahuasca ceremony and this drug to that drug and think they're enlightened, but they're actually, they're often using the plant medicine as a means to facilitate a state of connection and a state of higher awareness, but they're not cultivating it. They're not learning from the medicine and going into the practice. And people do the same thing with meditation. So it's like meditation and plant medicine ceremonies can show you the path, but it's kind of like having a vision for a new invention. Now you got to go in the shop and build a prototype and test the damn thing.
Sure, yeah.
Or you're going to be one of these guys that walks around saying, I thought of that before they did. Yeah, but where is it? Actually, Napoleon Hill talks about that in his book, Think and Grow Rich. Just in paraphrasing, and it's been many, many years since I read that book, but he was talking about how he was giving a lecture and he was citing a passage from his book, Think and Grow Rich. And after the workshop was over, or the lecture was over, a man came up and said to him, I thought of that first, and pulled out a page of scribble or whatever, and was kind of like attacking Napoleon Hill for like stealing his idea.
Right.
And Napoleon Hill said, you may have thought of that first, but you didn't do anything with it. I did. And that's why you're here.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's sort of a metaphor for the issue of plant medicines and meditative practices is manifestation comes in 3 stages: thought, word, deed. Those are the step down of spirit into matter. So the meditation process, we can call it the realization of the mental construct that may be challenging. The word is speaking it out loud to yourself. I see this or I see that, but the word generally means putting a plan of action together. I choose to apologize to the following people. I choose to X, Y, and Z. And then the deed is the act of doing it, going out and doing it. And so I think it's important for all of us to remember that we have to commit ourselves to the vision, the intuition, the insight, the thought, the word, being clear on how we plan to execute the process of the healing or the transformation, and the deed of committing ourselves to the actual execution of the plan. Otherwise, what happens is you just have the same stuff reoccurring over and over in meditations. The same shit comes up in
I can
shamanic
relate.
ceremonies.
I would say that I was probably an individual who was maybe at some point on my path approaching meditation as an avoidance strategy. I sat for long, long retreats. I don't regret them at all, and they were very important and profound. But I was probably operating under the belief that if I just sit still long enough, all my problems will just go away and I'll just become a perfect healed person. But that's just not the experience.
Yeah.
And so I think for real healing, real self-development, real growth, you have to invite other people into your process. And that's why community is so important. You really can't reach the fullness of what you're capable of all by yourself. It's just not how we're built. So you can, meditation is profound utility to get clear on yourself, but to really reach the next level of your being, you have to invite other people in, whether that's a coach, therapist, a community of individuals who are also involved in the work of self-development or are willing to hold you accountable and give you constructive feedback. But you really can't do it by yourself.
I don't think anything meaningful has ever been done in the world by any individual.
Yeah, I used to think, they used to say, in Buddhism, they'll say the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And I would always think to myself, Buddha and the Dharma, but the Sangha, why do I need these other people? I don't need these people. Mm-hmm. And I see that actually you really do.
That's why I call my spirit gym meetings Sanghas. That's exactly why. Before I forget, I wanted to share the title of one of Shinzen Young's books that I thought was absolutely an excellent book. And I think it's called The Science of Spirituality.
Science of Enlightenment.
The Science of Enlightenment. Thank you. I'll make sure that's in the show notes for you guys. I think that's also available in audio, if I remember right. Do you remember?
I'm sure it is.
Yeah.
He's got it's like a very extensive audio. It's like a CD book called The Science of Enlightenment. But then it was later created into a actual book.
Right.
So there's 2 separate entities there. I'm certain that you can get the book, and you can probably get the book on Audible as well.
Yeah, I think I got the CDs. I can't remember what I got first, the book or the CDs.
CDs came out decades probably before the book.
Okay, so I probably got those first, but then when the book came out, I read it because I thought somewhere in my library here, I have a notebook full of notes because I listened to it while I was lifting weights in the gym. But then I was so impressed, I read the book cover to cover, and I thought he did one of the best, if not the best job of actually giving a scientific explanation of the Enlightenment process. And I think for a lot of left-brainers and kind of Western mindset people, it helps to have the confidence that there is a scientific foundation for these processes. And I didn't need that myself because I'm a pioneer explorer type. I just go, my philosophy is I'm going to test it and see if it works. I don't give a shit what other people say. But because I teach so many people that are very, very trapped in their left brain and their intellect, I found it very, very helpful to really get a good grasp on all the science that he shares. Now, I've got, 50 books in my library that do that. But I think because Shinzen Young has taken such a deep journey into all these practices and his own life experience, he could convey the science.
And he's a bona fide scientist.
Right. And he
You
can
know?
he can
Yeah.
convey it in a
Sure.
way.
I
that-
think combining science and spirituality, you know, quantum physics and enlightenment
Yeah.
is a very popular thing to do.
Yeah.
It often just leaves a bad taste in my mouth because I think for most individuals, you're trying to do both of those, you're not doing either one well. If you're trying to describe science and spirituality, you're not doing either one very well. But once you hear Shinzen do it, everything else pales in comparison. As far
Yeah,
as I'm
it
concerned.
was. That's why I brought it up because, and I kind of had a mental note. I didn't write it down, but half an hour ago or so, at some point, it jumped in my mind. I got to make sure to remind everybody to check that out.
I would say quickly too, he's an example, as we mentioned before, like cultivating this sense of mastery over your own mind through the practice of meditation opens the possibility of mastery in many other domains of life. And
Yeah.
he's a great example. He's a great scientist. Another teacher of mine was an amazing author and psychotherapist. I have another teacher who's an amazing collegiate professor and author. You are a man of many talents. Obviously, it's like the utility of meditation, like I said before, it's not to become a great meditator. It's to become steward and sovereign of your own mind and then direct your mental energy into meaningful pursuits and become excellent in those pursuits.
Yeah, I think becoming meditative, which I would translate as to become connected to, to allow yourself to flow into, be part of. When I'm doing the tree meditation, I'm becoming connected to and relating to and in relationship with the tree as opposed to being an object of my perception or just a thing growing out of the ground.
Mm-hmm.
It's really, like when I lift rocks, I walk in and I open my heart and fill the rock lifting area with my heart consciousness. And I say, hello, stone Buddhas. It's Paul. Would you like to create some beauty together? And I just wait, and then boom, a big yes comes, and I can literally feel them all saying, yes, let's party, let's play. And so because it's so dangerous, I found that the first step into opening my awareness is to become connected to. And then instead of moving rocks, I'm creating with. Connect to, create with, put your ego in the back seat.
What you're describing is a very subtle shift in vantage point, but that subtle shift is very, very significant.
Well, I think, because I've done thousands of pieces of art in my life, I can look at any of my art and say, there's where I was painting versus there's where I am being painted through by the art spirit or the soul. And I think once we find anything that we have enough love for or passion for to immerse ourselves into to the point where we can drop the ego, it teaches us how to do it. Like there's hairstylists that are cutting your hair, but there's hairstylists that are connected to and working with your hair. There's gardeners that chop shit out and move shit, but you go to like a good Japanese garden where the gardener is like enlightened.
Just got back from Japan. You're right.
Yeah.
You could say the same about a chef. There's chefs who cook food, and there's other chefs who create and enhance what nature is creating. It's like mastery in any domain presupposes getting out of the way.
Yes.
And the practice of meditation is just all about getting out of the way.
And there's a lot of that, actually, that kind of language, expression, dialogue in Stephen Mitchell's second book of the Tao. You ever listened to that one on audio or read it?
No, I have his translation of the Tao that I read every morning.
Get a hold of his second book of the Tao. He talks about a lot of different stuff in there, like I think it's Chef Wen Wei and The Enlightened Butcher, and it's really good. I've probably listened to it about 20 times. In my car, I have a couple of key things like some Alan Watts, some Joseph Campbell, some Stephen Mitchell. So whenever I'm on a long drive, I put you can never listen to these too many times in the car. Yeah. And I know that, okay, if I've got to drive my car, I'm going to go visit with Joseph Campbell on mythology or Stephen Mitchell on, this or that. And I think, too, it's important to remember that when we're listening to books or reading books or things that touch our soul enough to go, wow, I'm really glad I listened to or studied that we want to revisit them, because as we grow, mature, and awaken spiritually, the same book turns out to have loads of stuff in it that we didn't have the bandwidth to bring in.
Without doubt, without question. I think that's particularly true with the Tao Te Ching, with Stephen Mitchell's translation.
Yes.
I'll read one a day and have for years and years, and you think you have one figured out, and then you read it 3 years later, and you're like, oh.
Yeah. Yeah.
3 years from now, I'll probably have a totally different conceptualization of it. It's the gift that keeps on giving.
One of my favorite lines, and as we bring this to a close, one of my favorite lines in the Tao Te Ching is, the Tao is deeper than deep, blacker than black. It is older than God. That is very deep, profound, and meaningful. Because one of the things it's telling you is that for most people, God is an idea, but the Tao is beyond ideas. It cannot be spoken. What a beautiful journey, buddy. Wow, I don't know how long we've been going. But,
me either.
Who cares? Why don't you share, just as we close, what you got going on, website, anything you want to direct people to so that they know where to find you?
Yeah, I have the Savage and Saint Collective. It's a men's community. We'll have another chat sometime. We'll talk about what Savage and Saint means. But
I think we talked about it in a previous podcast, didn't
probably,
we?
Yeah,
we did. If you guys want to listen to our first podcast, because this is our second podcast, right?
Yeah. So I have the Savage and Saint Collective, an online men's group, and I'm on Instagram, savageandsaint.com. I've recently kind of distilled the Masculine Vitality Program, my online men's course, into a book that I have available for your listeners. It's
good.
Like, I think $5. So we'll put that in the show notes so they can get the link there.
What's the title again?
The Savage and Saint Manual.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So it's practical information that an individual can implement into their daily life to profoundly up-level their felt sense of vitality, excellence, and freedom.
Good.
And birth mystical experience.
Awesome. Love that. I tell you what, if it wasn't for my mystical experiences, I would have died of flatland a long time ago. I wonder how people, they don't make it. That's why all the drug use and addiction and video game addiction and...
Yeah, well, we talked about this last night, but sinking your teeth into this path of cultivation and deepening of your consciousness opens up possibility in life where you realize the passing of time and the aging process can actually be very beautiful because you're deepening in your experience of reality as time passes and your skills deepen. But without that, it seems pretty bleak.
I'll tell you what, I'm close to 64. And aside from looking in the mirror and going, what the hell happened? Because
you look great.
Well, I of course have a visceral sense of, what my athletic ability was like when I was your age.
Yeah, sure.
I reached peak strength at 42. That's when my athletic ability was at its best. On my 42nd birthday, I did 42 rock climber chin-ups nonstop. I did 10 sets in the deadlift with 500 pounds off the box. I was lunging sets of 6 to 8 with 315 on the bar for 6 sets. I was clean and jerking 160-pound dumbbell, 4 reps on each arm. I was doing, I think, 8 single-arm chin-ups on each arm at 42. So as a 64-year-old man, I look back and I'm like, where did I go?
Yeah.
You know, like I go out in a rock garden now and I move slower. I'm more present. I don't try to impress myself, so the fire that it took to give me the strength to create everything I've created. Because one of the things that I know is stronger your mind is, the stronger your body needs to be to carry it. Like for me to do all the work I've done and travel so much and output so much, if I didn't have that much strength in my body, I've watched many of my colleagues just burn out, just, get sick and burn out. And a lot of them, 1 or 2 years on the lecture circuit, they're gone. They get sick and they just can't do it anymore. And Penny and I spent almost pretty much 25 years moving nonstop, making it around the world twice a year. Oftentimes I was doing 100 or more presentations a year. And, when you're moving constantly like that, trying to keep yourself in shape and coaching clients everywhere and writing articles and books and lesson curriculum for the Institute, I look back on it and I'm like, wow, I don't know how the fuck I did that. But I do know one thing. If I was not living the way I teach people to live, I could not have done it. It would have killed me. That, your mind can actually kill your body. So I found that, you got to meet your mind with your body. If you've got a powerful mind but a weak body, the mind will actually wipe the body out. You got a strong body, but you don't develop your mind, you'll always be an average person as far as what you get done in the world. So the point I was just going to make, though, is that like I have so much more love and appreciation and connection to my life at this age that I look back on my life and it's almost like a miracle I made it through it all.
I can relate to that.
It's like, wow, how did I navigate the minefield, and how did I navigate just my own fire and my own, intensity? And I just think that, and it also makes me sad when so many people today avoid the aging process. They're trying to plasticize themselves and upload their soul to a fucking hard drive somewhere, which is just such silliness, And I think that's what happens when you don't cultivate wisdom as you grow.
Or you're disconnected from reality, like we said earlier.
Yep. So I'm just grateful. There was a point in my life where I didn't give a shit if lightning struck, because I felt like I'd seen what there was to see, done what there was to do, and, lived with such intensity that it's almost like the next frontier for me was death. I had to go see what's behind the curtain. I wanted to, that's one of the reasons I have done so many really deep plant medicine ceremonies. I wanted to like completely and utterly annihilate the ego so I could really have a meeting with God, and I've had plenty of them. But when my second and third child came along, Mana, then Zoe, Mana 9 years ago and Zoe 6 now, I got reinvigorated. I really realized I got to keep my feet on the ground. I can't get too into the mystic because it tends to want to take me out of here and go explore the rest of God, which for some people can be dangerous. But my kids, with the world they're coming into, I'm like, okay, I've really got to stay firmly planted in the earth and keep my head in the stars, metaphorically, but I've got to have just as much feet on ground, because I've got to be able to exemplify to my children how to manage life in a world not only so vastly full of information, but conflicting and confusing information. And how do they navigate all the booby traps? Because the number of booby traps is growing at a rapid rate.
They're definitely born into a different world than you were and than I was.
Shit, I remember when fax machines were
Me too.
the new invention. And man, I've seen all sorts of stuff. And wow, anyhow, without a long to do, I'm just saying I'm grateful that I've made it here without destroying myself. But life's taught me how to live. And it's like, wow, finally I've learned how to live.
Well, Paul, I'm glad that you've learned how to live and that you've shared what you learned with individuals like me.
Thank you.
You've given me a great advantage, just walking the path a couple of decades ahead of me, showing me what's possible. And I'm really grateful to have you as a friend and teacher.
Thank you, buddy. Well, it's great to have you on the journey with me and all the CHEK professionals and spirit gym practitioners. It's made my life a lot more rich. It's amazing when you get to see people put to work what you teach and embody it. And it's my constant reminder of what my commitment to my life was. And to see people like you, really grow into a great teacher, leader, and guide for other people. It's like, that's what a legacy is. Like I can leave the world when that time comes and know that I really did my very best to plant a lot of beautiful seeds to grow.
Hell yeah, you did.
So that's the beauty of aging, is if you've really done some work to sow some seeds of common sense, intelligence, wisdom, love, intention, those are good things to leave in the garden. I know you're doing the same thing too, so thank you for that. And there's a bunch of you guys, but Kyle, Mike Salemi, Jason Picard, all my instructors are just amazing people. A lot of my students, higher level students especially, are just really, any one of them could have had this conversation with you today and probably said many things from their own experience, just like either one of us could, that's great. But I'll stop rattling so we can go get into the rock garden and find some food.
And hit a sauna.
And have a sauna. And I just might be able to get some work done this afternoon. Otherwise, I'll have to succumb to the forces of God's little spirit beings called my children. And thank you to my sponsors for all your love and support and amazing products. Thank you to all of you. Anything you buy from the sponsors puts hands in ethical, moral corporations and companies that are making things that really do help us. They put money in the hands of organic, biodynamic, regenerative farmers. So we all win. We get healthy. We support the people that are supporting us, and we support the planet. And that's really the boomerang of love coming home for all of us. And if you haven't checked out my Spirit Gym program, go to myspiritgym.com and check it out. Check out Michael's resources. Website one more time.
SavageandSaint.com.
SavageandSaint.com. And I will look forward to sharing the most amazing podcast I can possibly come up with for you next week. Lots of love. Thank you again, Michael.
Thank you, Paul.
Aho, great spirit. We are done.
We are done. We are done.
We are done.
Thank you for listening to Spirit Gym with Paul CHEK and today's guest, Michael Holt. Michael is offering Spirit Gym podcast listeners a special deal on his ebook, The Savage and Saint Philosophy, which also comes with his Vital Breakthrough Meditation Masterclass, plus 3 other bonuses. Go to bit.ly/Savage and Saint to get the whole bundle for just $5. That's bit.ly/Savage and Saint. You can connect with Michael on Instagram and YouTube at Savage and Saint, or on his website, savageandsaint.com. For more interaction with Paul and to share ideas and ask questions about topics discussed in this podcast, we invite you to join his Spirit Gym program and community. There are 3 different levels of membership to fit your budget and lifestyle, where you can participate in live Q&A sessions with podcast guests, access the members forum within the Spirit Gym community, where you can chat with other members, attend weekly virtual meetups with Paul, and study the comprehensive Master Key online program. Explore the options and subscribe today by going to myspiritgym.com. And finally, if you enjoyed today's episode, please consider leaving us a 5-star rating and a warm review on the podcast platform of your choice. This podcast is available on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Amazon Music, Audible, and YouTube.